All right, so Burke. So your full name is Michael Daugherty.
Michael Burke Daugherty, and I've always
Daugherty.
gone by Burke, but I had a Facebook presence as Michael, and I'm Burke other places. I need to clean that all up. So my apologies to those trying to figure out just who the hell I am and what name I
Yeah,
go by, but Burke.
Burke.
Yeah,
Yeah, and your company is Bronze Pie,
yes,
and you are based outside of Charlottesville, correct?
yes, yes.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to
And
remember when we got connected. It was probably a few years back, just probably through social media somehow.
yeah, I think it was just before the Nashville show last year.
Yep.
Somewhere around there as far as when we physically met, and
Right.
it took me a while to make the connection that you were two or three entities yourself,
Yeah.
between drum making, stackering, your cymbals. So you're wearing many hats too.
Yeah, doing my best, trying to stay on top
Yeah.
of all of it, as we all
Well,
are.
this podcast that you're doing is great. I've been loving it, and your
I
content's been top notch. It's a real boost. You give us something all to chase behind and catch up with you.
I'm certainly
Hats off.
trying, man. I appreciate you saying that. I have a lot of creative energy right now, and talking with guys like you has been the thing that has inspired me to no end the last few weeks. I just posted literally right before we got on this. I posted the episode I did with Philippe, PGB Artisan Cymbals.
Can't wait to see that.
Had a blast talking with him. He's a great guy, and what
Indeed.
I find to be interesting is just how similar a lot of us are in our temperament,
Mm-hmm.
kind of our stories sort of align in some ways as to why we even got into doing this and what it is that we do and what it is that we see ourselves doing in the future. So I'm definitely interested in knowing a little bit more about your backstory and what got you into, really what got you into music, but then also what got you into cymbal making.
Oh, it's been from the beginning. I think college was on a dare. I did a couple of years of community college. I was thinking about veterinary school, and then switched gears majorly because I was following my impulse to make things. I've always been a hands-on shop kind of person from the get-go. So I started to segue out of academic studies, and then maybe even arguably becoming kind of wayward. And my parents were like, I'm sure they had the conversation, we got to do something with this kid, get him on track or whatever. I was playing bass at the time, and they dangled, music school in front of me, and I was thinking, well, this is absurd. There's no way in hell I'm going to get into a conservatory, with a classic rock background, basically.
Yeah.
And well, so I agreed to do go up to the college, do an interview and an audition, and I had my cassette tape with jams that I had recorded and that sort of thing, and totally expecting not to get in. Little did I realize that just about every freshman gets in, because that's the cash cow for any university. So I ended up in school, and I guess around my beginning of my sophomore year, I decided to switch over from jazz performance to arts management, because you quickly realize I was a good enough musician to play in bands, could do fine with your small gig sort of thing, but I wasn't going to set the world on fire. And I was aware of that. And I watched one recital with this young kid who came to college at like 16. And he was a classical pianist. It's not even my world. But I was like, okay, that was the deciding factor. After that recital, I was like, I'm changing my major, because the difference between that guy's ability and everybody underneath, I could see what was there, who was going to do what. And so arts management gives you a quasi business degree and still allows you to minor in music studies and at least come out of school with some, education on the outside periphery of the music industry. Or in that case, it really was about any format of the arts: museums, galleries, music, theater, all of that. And it was sort of a new program at that college at the time, but it was a good move for me. It was a good move. And then got out of college, and before I went into college, I was dabbling in making electric basses, and had purchased some, woodworking equipment, and was going after that as a hobby. I decided to go back into that again, and started making electric basses and selling to, as we all do, you sell to some friends, and then it branches out and branches out.
Mm-hmm.
And then reality hits. I was in a relationship, and along came a mortgage and all these other things. It's like, well, we're not going to meet that, making basses. So I went into working for a cabinet shop for a while, did work there for about 4 years, which gave me access to machinery that I couldn't buy. I could still do my basses on the side. Then I broke off and had my own cabinet shop, and still dabbled in making basses. And basically, mill work was paying the bills. So bass making kind of faded out, responsibility set in. And then music wise was gigging all along. And we had this, I lived in a small town with about 30,000 people. We had 2 new bassists moved in. We were all fighting for the same one drummer. And it was a little incestuous group of jazz musicians that if that drummer had a gig, nobody else could get a gig.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I think I could do this. So I did a lateral move. I traded an old bass for an old drum set, and just, learned how to keep time. And I knew the songs. I knew as a bass player what I wanted from a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
So that just gave me a foothold to get started. And then, as with all things I get into, I think, well, I want a better kit. I want better cymbals. And this was another little rural area. There was no going to a music store to get a good cymbal. It was, at the time, eBay was a fun environment. We're talking middle 2000. So once I got into that, in Cymbalholics, a buddy of mine turned me on to Cymbalholics. And once I started reading about making cymbals, I was like, this is it. So I'd go to the flea market, buy old beaters, brass cymbals, whatever I could get my hands on. Stainless steel was another one that I had access to. So I started making things out of stainless steel. So I started almost dabbling with cymbal making immediately in 2006, made my own stave kit shortly thereafter. And that's just the way I've always done things is, once I'm into it, I want to dive and reverse engineer it and try to make it. So, and then just one thing leads to another. Little hiatus involved there. I moved to Charlottesville 8 years ago, and was tied up with renovating this house that we're in. So all drumming just came to a complete halt. And then finally, once this was established, picked up work. And as a wallpaper hanger, I'm not doing anything with woodworking anymore. And that is my main source of income is hanging wallpaper. And it's not grandma's wallpaper. This is high end. Some of it's $1,000 a strip. So it's high stakes. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's a great gig. I mean, I don't have a shop anymore. I don't have to deal with subcontracting overhead. It's my 15-year-old Subaru and my iPhone, and I can scoot around and do my thing.
Yeah.
Bucket of glue, a pack of razor blades, and a gallon of gas. I'm off to work.
Yeah.
So I'm spread thin, between Bronze Pie, BW cymbals, Koei Day cymbals, wallpaper, and then life. I ping pong back and forth. So I don't know if anybody's picked up on the irregularities of keeping up with the website, or I'm pretty good with communication, but things definitely fall through once in a while. There just isn't enough time in a day. But
I understand that, man.
I'm fine with it. I'm used to it. I've had 27 years of it. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. You got to be a certain type of person to be able to handle jumping around that much. But if you are, it's far superior than clocking in and getting that 9 to 5 where you're just sitting in a cubicle. It's like there's something really frustrating about it, and also really satisfying about just managing all of the craziness. And so you tell me a little bit about, so you have BW Cymbals is Burke's Works cymbals. That's your handcrafted cymbals from B20.
Yes.
Assuming you get that from overseas in Turkey.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. And then you got the Koei Day. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, Koei Day. I'm acting as a rep and distributor for Koei Day. And that was really the impetus for getting into, I'd always wanted to, well, I got to back up a little bit. A shout out to Chad Anderson with Cymbalholics, because that just lit a fire that would not go away. Once I was into it, I was hooked. And then the other person, sort of an odd influence, was Jerry Porter with Hazel Should.
Very much so.
You know, I loved his site, and that was a great resource for me to pick up a decent cymbal at a good price. And his site was always informative, humorous, enjoyable. So I really enjoyed all of that. And so, not that I'm doing anywhere near the same kind of job that he's doing. I always have put him up on a pedestal as to, you know, how he runs his business, and I've always liked his model. And that was a real inspiration to me. And he's a super great guy. You know, he's accessible, you know.
Yeah.
So at the time, I talked to him on the phone occasionally on the cymbal purchase, and I was like, oh, this looks like fun. I didn't realize how much was involved in it, but, you know, from a naive outsider's viewpoint, it's like, this could be a fun little side gig. The only problem I had is I'm not in LA and I don't have access to the amount of cymbals.
Yeah.
I don't dabble with eBay at all. Back in the day, you could score a good cymbal for $75 with enough headroom on it to flip it if you wanted to. But now it's a whole different thing.
People know how to Google a lot. Googling is obviously, you know, everything. You look up something, look up the label, and you can see what the value is. So you just rarely ever have people throwing up a $500 cymbal for $75.
Yeah, and you zoom in on the stamp, and you say, "Oh my God, that's a trans stamp!" You know, you actually win the auction for, you know, $100.
Yeah.
So those days are gone.
So
everybody's educated.
I'm interested in that, and how you a little bit of the process of how you go about what you do with Bronze Pie, because you're getting your hands on cymbals and then selling them. I'm guessing you have dealers, and you're a dealer for certain brands, or are you also dabbling in a little bit of what Hazel Should does with kind of, I don't know how he works his magic to get his hands on all of the stuff. It's kind of wild.
Well, there was a little lesson that came out of that for me. I had purchased some cymbals from him, and then I had my own little stash of cymbals I had picked up, and he had some cymbals up that I wanted, and I didn't want to spend any money, so I discussed trading some cymbals. And he was like, "Well, I normally don't do trades, but, you know, these were decent enough cymbals that had some appeal." And this was multifaceted. My desire to have the cymbals he had was so strong that it overrode my better senses. And I traded off, you know, 3 or 4 really nice little cymbals for 1 or 2 cymbals that I wanted more. And I remember the price he offered for the trade, and how I was just like, you know, that is so much less than I paid for them. And it didn't mathematically make sense for me to trade these cymbals for other cymbals, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
And so that was a lesson in trade-in value versus retail value versus consumer impulse. All these factors come together, and that was a while back. But fast forward to now, with Bronze Pie. Bronze Pie, the idea was to specifically deal with independent cymbalsmiths, even though I still have some old cymbals that I throw up on the site. They're there. In fact, I need to change the prices because the used cymbal market has basically crashed, and they're way overpriced. And actually, I like the cymbals. I don't care if they sell or not. They've sort of been vetted, you know. But that's how Bronze Pie came about, and it came along in conjunction with Koei Day. My wife is from Osaka. By chance, we discovered Koei Day cymbals while we were in Tokyo, bar hopping one night, and music stores are open to the wee hours. And, you know, we're talking nice vintage stuff. So I'm in a shop. There's old, you know, Zildjian Ks from Turkey. There's Spizikinos in there. And then I ran across the Koei Day, and I asked my wife to translate the tag, and she was giving me the information, and she looked at the address and said, "Well, this is just a few blocks from my house." So that was the dumb luck factor.
Wow.
So immediately I was on, as soon as we got back to Osaka, I was, trying to get in touch with him and meet him and visit. And that happened, and loved his product. Super nice guy. He doesn't speak any English. I don't speak any Japanese. My wife helps with that. He has a little bit of English, enough that we can one word communicate to each other. And just, I felt a connection with him immediately. And over the next couple years, I was proposing the idea of like stepping into the American market. And he had a little concern about meeting demand, because it's a small outfit. Basically, it's Toshio Koei, and maybe one or two other guys that kind of float into. He has one main cymbalsmith guy. At least this is what it was 2 years ago. I've been back since COVID. Going back this fall. But at the time, he had one lead cymbalsmith, and then the other guys could float between making other metal fabricated items and then cymbals. And Koei has sort of a two-tier cymbal system. You have cymbals that are made on a spin form machine to do the basic shape, and then they come back and overhammer over that, or go to the hammering, the power hammer, to do different things and manipulate the sound for each series. He has a couple series in Japan that aren't here. They're mainly B8, and it's just not worth his sending B8 stuff over because of the price point. It's not worth it. But so then you have the other series that's completely hammered. It's a combination of power hammer work and hand hammer work. And that's the 703 series, which is kind of his flagship cymbal. It's the most expensive one. It's the one that's made with, a nod to Turkish methods.
Cool.
And styling,
Yeah.
And so combining the possibility of being a rep for Koei, the back of my head thought about Bronze Pie, mesh that together. So each one of my projects, cymbal related, they all kind of piggyback on each other. When I do a show with, say, PASIC or NAMM, specifically PASIC, where I can bring some other cymbals with me, the benefit to the other guys is that doing a show like PASIC or NAMM is extremely expensive. So for PGB or perhaps Burn or yourself or something, you're not going to be able to go set up a booth.
No way.
And so I could bring this along, have a few samples of their work. It just gives exposure.
Right.
And the cymbal making community is awesome. Everybody is very supportive of each other. And the guys that I carry their cymbals were really friendly, open to the idea. There's no contract, it's all, we met on Instagram, or I cold called them, and a couple were like, yeah, on consignment, no problem. And they send me some cymbals. Yeah. And they took a risk on this whole thing, and I'm forever thankful for that. It's been wonderful. It's been wonderful. So, gosh, I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but.
Well, you're right at the point where you're about, like, the last thing for me, the thing that I think we'll have we could cover a lot of ground on is Burke's Works. You yourself, after having all this experience with different brands and carrying other cymbals, now you're making your own cymbals. And I'm interested in that process, how that's been for you. Where are you at now? Are you kind of, are you working with lines of cymbals, or are you kind of just doing one-offs, or because
strictly,
yeah.
Oh no, it's strictly one-offs.
Yeah.
I don't have the desire to get into lines of cymbals, and I want to keep cymbal making fun for me. I have other areas where I have to be the grown-up. So this is my fun time where I can go to the, into my studio and make something, and it can be whatever I want. And thanks to the other things I have going, I'm not under pressure to have to move it. To earn an income from it. So that's the big difference that separates me from the rest of you guys that are trying to do this full time. And hats off to you, because it's a tough road. It's got a long learning curve. And then we have this imaginary headroom, and we'll tap into that on pricing.
Yes.
my well, we'll come back around to that. So cymbal making for me is right now is a joy. It's a passion. I'm in a great position where I get to look at other people's work, play it. I get to reverse. Well, that's the other cool thing about cymbal making is that we're all doing this reverse engineering everything.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh yeah.
Little scraps of knowledge, lots of mistakes, and figuring this out by, the hard way. Now there's a lot more information. You can get online. YouTube is littered with great examples of what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
When I was just reading off of Cymbalholics, and I would read about Skiba or Roberto or anybody else at the time that was, Loritz and all these people who are they're the gods to me. That first wave that showed up on the internet, you had the opportunity to pick up a little bit of information, like, well, what do they mean between shaping and tensioning, and what's, you realize, oh, well, there is a difference there, and I have to figure this out, as opposed to entirely having to figure out that you can shape and tension and they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
And what that means, and then how it affects things, and on and on and on and on.
Yeah.
So so keeping it back to Burke's works, that's what's up with my brand. Is I make a cymbal that suits my taste at the time, and a lot of times it takes me, I will drag out, I might post a cymbal, within the week that I made it, but the cymbal that ends up on the website might end up being entirely different because I've changed my mind, or I hear that the cymbal wants to go this direction. And one thing for me is that I don't fight the bronze. If I hear that it's heading a particular direction and the qualities that I like, then I run down that path. I might start off in this and I end up over here, and I'm totally fine with that. I'm not aiming for a particular sound or model or vibe most of the time. It can generically fall in jazz or rock or effects or whatever. So be it. That's the route that I go. And then there are times where somebody wants something in particular, and then I try to run that down,
Yeah, it's like having that tool in your belt to be able to do that, be able to execute a vision. And then, but I mean, I think probably if you were to poll all the independent makers, we would vastly prefer being able to just sit with a piece and ask it, what do you want to be? And then just start, and then let it kind of take you. Cause usually I think I'm getting out of this phase, thankfully now, but even just a year ago when I would make cymbals, I would feel like the ones I tried to impose my will on were the ones that I didn't love. I wasn't, wasn't about, they kind of just had a one-dimensional sound to them. But if I just kind of went in with like a weird idea, like I'm going to try a cymbal with the tiniest bell I can ever make and see what happens. No idea about shape or tension, how stiff or loose, none of that. Just like, let's just start and see what happens. And then you kind of just change, your mind changes, and you're watching the metal, how it moves, and you kind of go, well, maybe let me do this next. And then before you know it, you have this thing that you weren't expecting. And almost every single time it was like, those were the cymbals that had magic to them. Yes.
And in trying, going back to your point where you're trying to make something and it's kind of striking you as lackluster, and creative wise, subjectivity in cymbals, both in the maker and the listener and player, it's this thing that just blows with the wind. I'll have a cymbal that it's like, I'm in love with this cymbal and I have it set up on my kit and I play along with that and I'm loving it. And then for some reason, one day I fall out of it.
Yeah.
And I'll pull up another cymbal and I'll be like, God, I hate this cymbal. Why don't I just sell this cymbal? And I put it aside. And then, 3 months later, I come around and pull the cymbal that I just said I just hate, put it back up. And it's like, hey, I like this cymbal.
Yeah.
So that in conjunction with, on the sales side of things and doing these shows where I'm running into people who say, I want this. And then we end up selling them something that's nothing like what they told me they wanted. It's all over the map.
Yeah.
The realization is that every cymbal has a player out there somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And even if I make a cymbal that I'm not particularly enamored with, as long as the quality is there and it does things that it's supposed to do. It might not suit my taste at that moment, but I know now when to just leave it be, that this cymbal will find a home somewhere. It's not up to me to judge it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because I'm not in love with it doesn't mean it's not a viable, good cymbal. And now bringing that in, how do I price these things? You know, you got the cymbal you love, and it's like, I want $1,200 for that.
Right. Yes.
And then this one I don't like, I'll let it go for $385.
Yeah.
And stupid thinking. You know, going now into pricing a little bit, my experience with woodworking, the first thing I would advise anybody at some point when you leave is to leave your garage space or your basement, even though the overhead's low, at some point, having a space where you're renting a space and you have bona fide responsibilities to keep it all afloat will quickly make you be realistic about stuff.
For sure.
And I'm not going to romance the cymbal thing here. I'm going to look at this as widget making, you know, which is in essence what we're doing. We can call it an art. At the end of the day, we're craftsmen and we're making a product, and we're trying to keep alive and maintain a quality of life at the same time. So, you know, in pricing, I've said from the beginning to almost every cymbal maker that I'm carrying, some that have, you know, been at this for years and doing it longer than I have, is like, how can you sell your product at this price? It's too low. And the same, I did a little impromptu interview with a few cymbalsmiths prior to this, knowing that it was coming and that we were going to, you know, I'd mentioned discussing this. Everybody, I was surprised, and I had a suspicion of this, I'm guilty of this too, is that we all are pricing our product with the upper end of your major manufacturers. And they have economy of scale. I'm not saying their overhead is real because they're massive compared to what we're doing, but they can also pump out units. They have distribution. They have ways to move product. They've been at it. They have a history and a legacy, whereas we're kind of coming in from behind.
Yeah.
But our overhead is as real as theirs if you're trying to do this as seriously. And you know, from a shop standpoint, I don't see how it's feasible to do anything for less than $50 an hour. You got to look at, you know, your billable hours, and out of that $50, that's the low end of it. That's my opinion, the bottom end of it. The real number for me back with woodworking when I was doing it was around 75 an hour. And it sounds like, oh, 75 an hour is a lot of money. Everything nibbles away at that, and you're still left with a pittance. You know, the joke was, you know, you finish a job and you have enough money, you have $100 in a 6-pack of beer at the end of a large kitchen job when it's all said and done, even at that price. And I had a friend of mine, I was afraid to raise my prices when I had a job because I was like, oh, I was going to lose work, and I was doing good work, but I didn't have the name recognition. So any job I got that came my way, you know, I would jump on it and take it and make it work. Some you win, some you just break even on, but it would keep you going to the next job. Cash flow is always the thing, because I had to make rent and insurance and automobile and pay subs. This buddy of mine who's a woodworker, a jazz guitarist, John Rose, a shout out to you, because he was so influential to me in many different ways. But he basically told me, man, you've got to raise your prices. And even my wife at the time was always like, you got to raise your prices. Like, I won't be able to. And I was like, how much? Basically, they said it came out to be double it. And that terrified me. I was like, double it. I'll never get another job. Well, the opposite happened. Because all of a sudden now my prices are in line with everybody else's. It gives you an instant sort of credibility from the customer side looking in. You don't look like a scab worker that's just desperate to get a job. To make, you know, the jobs got better because my price now is high enough that the bullshitters wouldn't even bother. Or I also learned the power of the word no.
Yeah.
You know, to myself and to others, you know, was a very important lesson. But it just changed, bumping my price up, having that realization that the bottom wasn't going to fall out. If anything, I was, besides making more income, the jobs were better. But the number one thing was the stress was gone.
Yeah.
Or less of it anyway. There's always
Right.
stress, but that was key. That was key. And the importance of quality of life. So I fight for quality of life. I might not, you know, sometimes I can't get the same bottom line because variables are different. I've never been one to pump out the same thing out of whatever I'm doing. Every project is a completely new thing with unforeseen consequences, and you just deal with it as they come.
Yeah.
But so applying that to cymbal making, now I don't have, you know, I have my studio, it's in the backyard. You know, there really is no overhead. The electric bill is $35, you know, to run that shop, to keep the lights on and air conditioner going, you know, at peak hours. It's nothing. So I could make a cymbal for very little and feed my creative need and put it out there for, you know, $400 and make a couple $100 and be perfectly happy. But I can't do that. I can't put that cymbal up on a website next to yours, next to Ray Burns or Phillips or anybody, you know, EMJ. It's not fair. And the other thing is that out of just right now, my cymbals are the most expensive cymbals on my site. And that's sort of a recent thing. I'm sort of like taking my own bullshit and doing it. And I can argue again that they are still too cheap, not for what it cost me to do it, but when I just recently, I checked Zildjian's, let's use a 22 cymbal for basis for all converts, okay? A K-Con, 2 weeks ago, when we first were entertaining doing this, I got online and said, what's the current price? And K-Cons were hitting around the 625 mark.
Yeah.
10 minutes before we came on here, I was like, I want to check that number again. They're 685 now. So I'm pretty sure that they've bumped their price unless something was different. But, you know, the top feed from Sweetwater and, you know, all the other places were coming up. Everybody's going to be bumping their prices due to inflation. It's not here, it's everywhere. Koei Day, their blank cost just bumped up in a major way, just because of scarcity and everything else, shipping and cost, inflation in general. We're going to keep prices hovering for now, but we're going to have a price increase coming up down the line. And try to sneak into it. We're basically letting everybody else raise their price first. And
then come up behind it.
And come up behind it and match it. But we're, you know, Koei Day's pricing, that can tie this back into pricing. So 4 of the lines that he carries are produced by spin forming, and then using the power hammer. But the power hammer he uses is standard old school. It's really a drop hammer that you can control the impact, and it hammers maybe 0.75 strikes, you know, or 0.7 of a second. It's pretty fast, you know. So you've got to move that cymbal less than a second and pinpoint, and they all have it on a pivot point so that you can get it. But they have this, every cymbal has a sheet that'll say 68 impacts around the bell. Then, you know, 60, you know, 9, then it'll go 73, and then it goes like this. And if you look at their pattern, you'll see the sort of spiral effect. That's kind of happening, at least on one line in particular. I tried it. I mean, a power hammer is a wonderful tool. The first time I tried one at the shop, I was like, this is the shit. This is, it was totally manipulatable in terms of controlling, making the cymbal. It was no problem. I could rough out a cymbal really quickly and then go right to an anvil and tweak it out. But when I got on that power hammer and trying to do the overhammering, you know, count, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, and go like this, and then end up back where it started, start the next line, and then have all of those try to make that little spiral effect. No, mine looked like I shot it with the shotgun. I mean, it was all over the place. And I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm just wasting blanks. But there is a hell of a lot of skill involved in operating those hammers. And you have a lot of finesse with them too. That's the thing that a lot of people, I want them to understand, that just because something's done on a power hammer, is not detracting from the value or the quality of the hammer.
Yeah.
All it's doing is saving your wrist and your shoulder.
Right. And we've talked about this a lot about, I'm looking to have one made, and I've been talking with an engineer that helped me make my lathe. And he's going to kind of help me. We're going to just figure out what to do about that. And you and I have discussed it quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be something that I'm going to be proud to share. Like, hey, I
hell yeah,
formed this. Like, I know it's a marketing thing to say fully hand hammered Turkish style, whatever. The reality is, if you can get it shaped, if you can get that cymbal initially shaped without sitting there at the anvil with your hand for, I don't know, an hour just to get a shape, that really can save your wrists and give you longevity.
It's tremendous.
It's huge.
It's tremendous. And also, a lot of the guys that are into this are also drummers. And I know that my right hand technique has gone to hell.
Yeah.
It's twofold. I'm not playing as much anymore, but I know that when I come off of a hammer session, that it's 2 or 3 days before I feel like anything's come back. I get my twitch reflex action is sort of back. But hammering just chews that up. It
does
for me. And also it's an age thing. I'm 55. My hands have taken a beating from doing woodworking and millwork for 8 years or so.
Yeah.
It's a real thing. So I'm preserving my physical ability to do the things that I want to. And I've got a scrap pile going with motors and springs and weights and steel piling up, waiting for the day that I can assemble this and make my own hammer as well.
Right.
It's coming. And the stigma of the power hammer is going to disappear.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a necessity for everybody that you hit a certain point, you're going to have to bring in the power hammer just to survive. And, the Turkish guys, those guys are the power hammer. And I'm sure, I'm going to make a guess, but the minute that guy's wrist blows out, if he doesn't get put over, like you said in the other podcast, over to stenciling, he's maybe working somewhere else.
Oh yeah, I've definitely heard that they just cycle young guys in there, use them up, send them out. The ones that do really well and are good at business end up rising in the ranks, become the managers, become the overseers, and that's just how that method works. Is they're just cycling people in and out. You have a cymbal, a $600-700 cymbal. 20 guys might have touched that one cymbal hammering on it. They've got these just lines and lines. You've probably seen videos, and there's tons of videos out there, just lines and lines of hammers and anvils and guys sitting there. And then they just throw it to the next guy, grab the next one, and just go to town. And, obviously for us, we're one guy. We're also the one that's doing the social media, and a lot of us are doing the shipping and the, interfacing with the customer and designing. And, I'm interested in this topic of pricing, because you and I have had that discussion as well. And I feel like we could figure out a way to tie this into valuing your art in one sense, but also valuing the product and what it provides. We kind of you touched on a little bit how, the bigger manufacturers will, they have a lot of overhead. They've got A&R teams, they've got marketing teams, they've got distribution, they've got all these things. And so you're paying, $680 something for a 22K con. And why would you come to an independent maker and spend that or even a little bit more to buy one of our cymbals? And, are our cymbals that much better, or are they the same, or are they worse? There's all these discussions, and I'm interested. I think there's probably a group of people that it'd be good to sort of unpack a little bit, maybe boil it down super simple. What is the independent cymbalsmith market? Like what is the value of an independent cymbal made by an independent maker? And what do we provide that you're not going to get from Zildjian, Sabian, Paiste, all of that? I think let me know what your thoughts are on that. I'm interested to discuss this.
It's probably multifaceted, but I guess the biggest benefit is it's one guy, one piece of metal from beginning to end. So there's an intimate connection with the material, and you're doing up to a certain stage, you're testing, you're reacting, you are involved with your material with the end goal in mind, and you can run that down. Whereas using the setup with 4 or 5 people hammering in a circle, you can't test a cymbal while the 3, 4, 5 other guys are hammering at the same time. You can't hear the way things to some, they have that, I'm sure in their own way, it's sort of formulaic, and I'm sure that they hammer a cymbal and they kind of overshoot a little bit with the hopes that it goes straight off the last anvil right to the lathe, and basically is curing in the box as it's coming to whatever destination.
Yep.
And it's a roll of the dice as to whether that cymbal settles into a what would be considered a good cymbal. We've all heard great cymbals and dog cymbals that are the same, of the
labeled
same line.
the exact same. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we have so much variation in what we do. The difference also here is that we can correct along the way and maybe tailor it a little bit more. I would say that your big companies like, Zildjian, Tasty, Sabian, Meinl, they have quality control that they're using in the factory, parameters that they've worked out to hit that before the unit goes to the next process, that's all dialed in for uniformity and for profitability. And they have ways of gauging that. We can't gauge it quite the same way, but the end result, I think the best thing that the consumer gets from a handmade cymbal is it's going to be unique. Somebody definitely cared about the product from beginning to end. You have somebody you can get on the phone with. You can talk to the person that made your cymbal, if you have an issue or if it's wonderful. Hell, you love the feedback. And, oh man, I just love this. That's what makes you want to go do the next one. It's on and it goes. I'm going to kick back this conversation a bit to Koei Day because I have a point of reference there. And I was trying to get there and I got sidetracked by what's going on in my head. The models that he makes that are spun form versus the 703, which is hammered, our typical 22 spun form variety is going to run around the high 5, low 6 range for a 22. His 703 series is close to $900. And that has a high flinch factor to it, to the consumer. I see it all the time at PASIC or NAMM, when they're comparing apples to oranges, why is this one, a good $300, $400 more than the other? Because Toshio has run a shop that also makes metal parts for metro cars, to washing machines, to whatever he's contracted to make. He knows what his shop cost is. He knows what he needs to make, what's involved in making it. This is something that you learn. He's in his 70s. He's second, maybe third generation, definitely 2 generations though, of running that business. They have a vast experience to pull from in terms of what it costs to make something. I know that his pricing for a fact is he's not a musician. So he's not romancing the cymbal like we might. He's looking at this strictly as, in order to do this, to make it fly, how much is this going to how much do I need per unit? How many units? What's involved? That's how he's arriving at his price, as anybody that's run a shop should do. The difference in price between the 703 and the other one is because it takes way more time. Even though it might be kind of fast, you might be surprised at how quickly you can make a cymbal. It's not over at that point. Those cymbals have to sit. They might go back to the hammer. Then you've got handling, packaging, shipping, all these other factors involved. But at the end of the day, I know that his price is probably the closest to what it should actually be. Because I know that he has no, when I say there's no romance, his passion is definitely about cymbals. This is his passion product that he makes. And he got into cymbal making through orchestral cymbals rather than kit cymbals. but he's totally realistic about it. If the numbers wouldn't work, he wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
He just makes cymbals for his own enjoyment. But now he stepped out into it, and things are more expensive to make in Japan. Not that much more, but you know, by the time you pay your taxes and your overhead and everything else, you still have to meet this bottom line number, and that's the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
And I feel that to some degree we are not doing that. You know,
They're not. Yeah.
And it's kind of time. And the other thing that's going to happen is educating the customer, because the customer doesn't understand. Even the same thing was in woodworking. You know, somebody bring me a photograph of a, you know, or a catalog and say, how much for this roll top desk? And I look at the price there, and it's, you know, $1,700. And they say, well, how much would you charge to make this? And I'd say, it's gonna be $6,000. And they'd be like shocked.
What? Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, well, that came out of Indonesia, and they're pumping them out, and they probably
they're making 200 of those
$600. No,
yeah.
They're making more like 20,000 of those things.
Right. Right.
And the same sort of, they don't have to worry about EPA, OSHA, all these other factors, you know, that modern industrial countries have to deal with, which applies to us, Japan, Europe. I don't know where Turkey fits into that, but I'm sure that they're sort of in the gray zone.
I mean, you see pictures of them smoking cigarettes right next to the smelting process. Like you got like lava pouring out, and they're smoking cigarettes in flip flops and no mask or no kind of issue. Yeah. I mean, and that's why the factories are there. That's why the foundries are there. You know, it's because the regulation really isn't what it would be in America. Yeah, because you can. And if you're going to do it here, you'd have to jump through all these hoops. And the barrier to entry to have foundries in the US would make the cymbals $1,500, you know, or, you know, $1,000 to do something if you were doing it in house. One thing I'm very interested in this idea of educating people about the process, because one thing that is, you know, if you think about it, the cymbal market is like the one market where people will buy 50 times the amount of cymbals they need for their gigs and just constantly sell, buy. And because there's such little understanding of the product itself, but also the product itself is so unique. And like you said, there's a cymbal for every customer, and you buy a cymbal you like, you might grow out of love with it later on. You might buy something and you don't like it at first, but then you realize later you love it and it works for you. But then you grow older and your ears change, your taste changes. So part of it is the nature of cymbals themselves. A big part of it to me, though, is just the understanding or lack thereof that we have about this product. I will say that, you know, my cymbals are priced lower actually than the top dollar big brand thing. And currently the reason I'm there is because I have this other line of products called Stack Ring, and that is my bus driver. That, you know, that's driving everything I do. You know, I don't make a lot of money on the drums.
That's brilliant.
It works for me.
Do this. I mean, everybody's kind of subsidizes making their own cymbals a little bit in one way or another. I'm doing it with wallpaper. Your Stack Ring and your drums help even things out. Some guys still have their day job, you know, or doing a part-time job. It doesn't need to be that way, but you have to somehow. It shouldn't, and it doesn't need to be. And I'm not in any way advocating like, okay, there's this, you know, cymbal makers revolt and everybody jacks their prices. And especially right now, you know, I'm going to come out sounding like an asshole in the middle of a recession, saying, raise those prices. But it's going to have to be done if you want longevity. Now, you know, everybody's going to have to go through the trials and tribulations starting out. And you know, what should you price your ride for? Whatever you can get, because you want to buy more blanks to do it again. And that's how you're seeing the world. You know, you're trying to convince your spouse that this is a good idea. You know, you got to make it support itself to justify all the time you're putting into it and the money you're spending on tooling, wasted blank, everything that goes with the beginning. But at some point you have to, just like we do with the cymbal and learning how to make it, you really should sit back and let me really dial this in, pull up your home economics. This is what I need per month to make things. And then what does it cost to make cymbals is another column. And that has to be everything down to the tape you use on your boxes, to the
How
bubble
much
gum
does that
you like
box
to chew.
cost? Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're
shipping and packaging,
huge. And when you're buying boxes, you could buy 25 in a little, that are bundled, 25 of them. Or, if you can get up to 100, you get like 5 bundles or 5 bundles of it, then your price drops by 10 cents per box. Okay. 10 cents per box, extrapolated out over a year. Do you move 200, 500 of those boxes? Then you start to, that's like real, that's real money. And then you take that concept with every little thing and you blow it up super large to a company, and one of the big box companies, they are doing that. And they have everything dialed in, and they know what it costs them to make a cymbal. They know that their electricity and water and, all of that is built within the price of these products. And we are, as makers, everybody, maybe with the exception of Funch, but we're all underselling our cymbals right now. And I would advocate, obviously I'm biased, but I would advocate that our product is better, fundamentally better, because we are artisans, makers that are listening to the product. Cymbal making is twofold. It's shape and sound at the same time. So it's not just that we're getting a certain shape and shipping it out. Like, we also have to deal with the sound aspect, which means that, yes, shape is very important, but there's also other factors that we infuse into the process. And a lot of us are drummers, musicians ourselves. We play. So, I take my cymbals to my gigs. I play them. I ones that I think are finished, and then I take it to another room, and then there's the reflective surfaces, and I'm hearing, I hear this thing in there that I'm not loving. So next day I take it back to the shop, I rework it. With a big box, you're not getting that. They have quality control measures in place to where they can put a cymbal up next to the master of whatever line they're playing it. And they're basically saying, they have a range for what is acceptable for a 22 AAX stage ride or whatever they got. They have an acceptable range. And as long as it falls somewhere within that range, okay, label it up, ship it out, we're good. And so if you're not in the room playing that cymbal, then you could very easily get a dog, and our world is so online, brick and mortar is having such issues that, it's only going to become more so about purchasing something online and hoping that it's good. And so you have a much better chance with one of us, you have a much better chance to get your hands on an instrument that's going to really do the job for you and be far superior. I did a little analysis of my business and, how much I broke it down into hourly for the first 4 years that I was making drums. And I think I maybe hit $3.50 an hour. That's what I paid myself.
Shocking, isn't it?
Yes, maybe that might be a high thing. But
labor of love is a scary factor,
scary factor, because I could just quickly. I allowed myself to do that. And, for those 4 years, I was working 70, 80, sometimes 90 hours in a week.
Yeah,
and I paid, and those weeks, 90-hour week, I'm dropping that down to maybe $2 an hour is what I'm actually pocketing. And so when we say, okay, the cymbal is $900, a lot of it is like, we've had batches of time in our life where we've done that. And we have like ate rice and beans and never gone out to eat, never gone to movies, never done any, literally just at home, like turning all the lights off during the day to save money on electricity because we had this passion and that's what we put into our work. And so you take that and then you look at that sticker price and you go, for the average customer, why does it cost this? That's why, that's, for one, there's an artistic factor in it. And I'm an advocate for us getting rid of brand loyalty when it comes to cymbals. I don't want to make everybody only buy Timothy Roberts. There are a couple guys that have just outfitted their whole kits with my cymbals, and I'm super grateful for that. Obviously, that helps pay the bills, but I kind of see it a little differently because every one of us has our own voice on voice, so to speak, on with our instruments. Like, I can play a Nicky Moon and I can go, that's a Nicky Moon. I know that.
Yeah, exactly.
Without it being labeled, I can play a Mangiello and know, and a Collingwood and know. And I haven't gotten enough of yours. I haven't played enough of yours.
I'm kind of new on the scene. I've been hammering for a long time, but I've only the last year put stuff out. Decided to do it. So yeah. I'm a nobody in this whole thing, really.
I think you're right there with us. You can tell. And so with that, it's like, why wouldn't you want to have a PGB and a Timothy Roberts and a Burke's Works? And they're all going to do something different. They're all going to sit in your set in a unique way and have a unique voice. And you might go, wow, I love pairing my Timothy Roberts with my BW cymbals because they do this certain thing that I can use in this certain environment when I'm playing with a certain band and we're playing these tunes. It's this perfect marriage, these two sounds. That to me is what that gets me excited when we're talking about cymbals, like, and how I would love for people to approach this whole topic and why independent cymbal makers,
you read it all the time on forums where somebody will say, you just can't slip a Zildjian A in the mix with your Ks or your Sabian in with your Zildjians. And that just has to do maybe with the cymbals they have, but it has nothing to do with the brand.
No, definitely not.
Every cymbal has a place if it's meeting a certain parameter of, professional quality. Yeah. A sound is a sound. It's how you want to use it, and that's how you should choose it.
So here's
loyalty is a tough one.
Here's my question for you. So like, I've asked everybody, every cymbal maker I've had on the podcast, I've asked them, what is the main thing you wish your customer knew about the cymbal buying process?
I'll answer that with the way that I sell a cymbal. Online sales is a very small part. Usually my sales happen at shows or here at the studio. Well, first, take your time and don't buy off of impulse. Close your eyes. I don't know, listen to samples. Trust your ear, trust your gut, and don't get hung up on, I've always wanted to have a, Renaissance ride or whatever. And it really might not be the ride that you need.
Yeah.
Because you're hung up on it because your favorite player or an album, has that cymbal and you really want that sound. And it's not going to come because it has that series written on it,
Right.
That cymbal and the cymbal that your favorite player is playing, they probably had access to something special anyway. They didn't go down to Guitar Center and buy that cymbal.
No, they got their special selection from that batch they put aside at the factory for. These are the really good ones.
These are the really
artists.
Good ones.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's what's happening there. So that's tricky. I would say put aside your biases as best as possible. Play some games with yourself. Don't watch the video. Listen to the videos. Make your little edit together 3 or 4 samples and try it. A great way to buy a cymbal. One fellow that I was in touch with had an incredible ear, both as a musician, he plays like 20 instruments, has his own recording studio. His ears were incredible. I'm using the most budget way to microphone a cymbal. I'm using a Shure MV88 Plus. I have not, my apologies to everybody, I have not stepped up in the game of audio recording yet. And it's sad considering what I do, but that's just the way it is. But that's also a good point. I'll come back to that. This guy would I would send him a video of a cymbal. He had a piece of music. He would take the signal and put that cymbal underneath of the music and listen to it in that context. Even though the cymbal wasn't playing to the music, he could hear the tonality against something that he has as a reference point. So find a reference point, take that sample. You can do this on any computer with GarageBand for that matter. slide it in there and see if the overall tonality works. And then, you know, in terms of an internet purchase, that's probably your safest way to do it.
It's a good thought.
You know, and you know, to avoid a return.
You could even queue it up on your phone and on your computer. So you literally have your phone demo. Yeah. So you don't even have to use different, like a program and cut it up. You literally just have it on your phone.
You could dumb it down.
Dumb it down that way, and then play it on the computer and play it there at the same time and just listen. You know, that's a killer idea.
Yeah, anything you can do to kind of mix and match a little bit and don't entirely rely on just one sound file. So as far as advice to the buyer out there, take your time, slow it down. Sometimes a cymbal might get past you because you delayed, but there'll be another, you know, there's always another cymbal out there. Don't despair.
Right.
It's tough. If somebody comes to my studio to sit down, and the way I do it is I say, bring your snare or your pedal, bring your favorite ride. If you're looking for a crash or whatever, bring what you have. And I just basically let them loose, say, tune my kit any way you want to. I cull out the cymbals that I think from what they've told me that they want. I have those sitting. There'll be 20 cymbals they can try against their own equipment. And then I just leave them alone and I check back in every half hour, 45 minutes. I don't hover. I come stick my head in. You doing okay? You have any questions? They'll say, give me an opinion or what do you think about? I go, then I leave again.
Yeah.
Go cut the grass, come back.
Yeah.
And they always buy a cymbal because they get a chance to use their stick on that cymbal and make that connection and they jump on it.
Yeah.
It's a really cool way to buy a cymbal. It's, you know, unfortunately, you know, where I live is not accessible to everybody, but at least for the people who are willing to drive an hour or whatever, and come check something out, they usually find something.
Yeah. It's true that the superior way is in person with your sticks, you know, preferably in a more open space, because really small spaces that are really reflective can be a little deceiving. But that is the far superior, you know, way to do it. But if you can't do it, you got to find someone you can trust. So you find the person that you go, that maker, I feel like I trust that maker. I feel like I trust their ear. I'm going to describe the kind of player I am. That's what I do with my customers is when they come in for a commission, I ask them, okay, what stick do you use? How would you describe your playing style? Sometimes they'll send me a video of them playing and I'll watch them playing. I want to see, okay, how much are they trying to dig in to the cymbal? Because if they really dig in, then I can't
ergonomics is everything.
Everything. So if they're like really digging in, they're playing with electric guitars and it's loud. There's no way I'm going to sell them a real thin, wobbly, you know, jellyfish-like cymbal. It wouldn't work, you know. So here's a question I've also asked everybody. I personally, in the last year, I've been in this process of, well, a little backstory is that I play a lot of quieter music. I get hired to do gigs where I am playing super soft. The other week, I was actually at a conference gig for a full week. The drum set was set up at the front of the stage, right next to the lead vocal, zero encasing around the kit. And then the first, you know, row of people was like 10 feet away from me. So I'm sitting there playing with brushes and sometimes even sticks, but I'm playing incredibly quietly. So I do a lot of gigs like that. So I have had a need for very, very thin cymbals, just so that I can get a low enough pitch. And I know I'm not going to be hitting it hard enough to get it to really open up so that, you know, it's all to me about the stick to wash ratio. And at what point does that wash overtake the stick and just totally muddy up the sound? There's a threshold, a volume threshold at which most cymbals will, you know,
they don't get better the harder you hit them.
Right. There's a volume threshold. And then with some cymbals, my favorite cymbals are ones that are nuanced. They're pretty thin typically, but they're the ones that even when you dig in, that stick still sits like right above that wash, you know, and it won't, but you know, a lot of cymbals that are just kind of made and chucked out, if they're not made with a lot of intentionality, there's a threshold where that wash will just kind of totally overtake and create a totally muddy sound. So that's a little context. But for the last year, I've been really interested in making heavier cymbals that play like light cymbals.
Yes. Yes.
Because they're so much more versatile. Like you can sit in a small room and hit a ride and go, oh, that's too bright and pingy for me because I'm a jazz drummer and I want it to be dark and woody and complex and all this stuff. It's like, okay, well, take that cymbal outside with your gig
Yep.
and then have someone play it while you stand 30 feet in front of it. You know, that pingy ride that you felt was too pingy and bright right behind it is very warm and mellow and lush and dark and woody and, you know, all the buzzwords we like to use. So I'm in that place currently where I'm making cymbals that are heavier, but I'm making them in a way that brings out nuance and making them feel like lighter weight cymbals. So your process, your thoughts on that?
Implies a thinner cymbal, even though it's not.
Yes.
And my weight range preferences have gone up as well. But you almost need, any drummer should really have a minimum of 2 favorite rides, if not 3, and they're conditionally chosen. One is for stage sound driven situations. You're just using the amplification of the instruments at hand. That's it. The other one would be a microphone that, or excuse me, a cymbal that is going to be mic'd close, or for studio work. They're 2 completely different cymbals. And projection is a real, am I still there? Okay.
Yeah.
Projection is a real thing. A lot of cymbals can sound great when you're right on top of them. They're useless in a stage environment. And in a little cafe setting, sure, because everybody can hear the same thing you're hearing.
Yeah.
But once you're on a stage and you've got a bunch of people in front of you, sound becomes a little, you know, you're now into something else. You either need a really loud cymbal or you're going to be mic'd, and that might change the cymbal use. So understand that dynamic. Don't expect one cymbal to do it all. And most of your professional drummers already know that.
Right.
But I had a cymbal once that taught me a big lesson. It was the Istanbul Jazz Turk, full Turk, 21 inch. And it was extremely complex, swirling with overtones, and even had some of the problematic around the bell problems of
barking seals. Yep.
Yeah. And but it had a nice feel to it. Behind the key, if you were playing a fast bop song, it sounded great. Anything with a little bit of aggression, it was wonderful. The minute somebody called it a ballad, it was like it was unusable, because you could hear all these notes that were clashing with the guitars. Put that into context in a small club setting or cafe setting. If you got 20 feet away from the drum kit, the cymbal sounded great. I would get that feedback. I was recording my gigs all the time. The cymbal sounded great, even on a ballad. On stage, I couldn't play it. I would be sitting next to the other guitarist, and I would tap that ride, and the guitar player would look over like, you know, ugh.
Yeah.
I was afraid to hit the cymbal, and I ended up selling it. But it brought me to a point which was, I like cymbals that have a little bit of funky factor to them. If they're too pristine and too clean, that might be great if you're recording and you're going to put a mic right on top of it. That might be just what you need.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be jamming with some amplification or a live setting using stage sound only, that little bit of discordal, disharmonic stuff actually turns into, with distance, the meat of the sound of the cymbal. You don't hear the clashing tonalities that you hear right on top of it.
Yeah.
And some really great cymbals had that funky factor to them. Give some distance, give it some stage sound, blend it all in. It sounds beautiful.
That's the good old Ks, the ones everybody raves about, spends thousands of dollars on, are the reason they're good. The reason they're sought after is because of their imperfections. Because the bell isn't, the bell is lopsided, or the hole isn't quite in the center, and there's weight. There's like a disproportionate.
It off.
Yeah. There's a disproportionate amount of weight on one side, or it like sinks right before the bell. And so, you hit it up near the bell and it's like the worst sound you've ever heard. But out at the bow, you're playing there. And also it's got this, like, it's just got a vibe that you can't really describe. And you feel like, oh, that's the magic cymbal. I'm kind of in that same place of sort of, it's like you almost want to design there's an element of imperfection that exists because we're doing this by hand. We're not a machine. So like our consistency all comes down to like even where our mental space is at, where we're, you know, the mood we're in, you know, do we have an argument with our spouse that morning, or, you know,
yeah, I detect a fight, a spousal
right.
fight.
And that, and the sound of this cymbal, you know, it all affects how, you know, so that human element is there. But then even from a design standpoint, it's almost like, do I design a little bit of weirdness in this? Do I kind of want one side to bulge? And you know, I go back and forth on that, but it seems like the ones that are more imperfect are the ones that have more of a vibe, but then you go too far and then it gets totally unusable.
There is a tipping point.
Yes.
There is. Unless you have somebody that's wanting something completely funky, as I don't know, that's just their bent and that's what they want. Another cymbalsmith, he lives over, it's Alex, you know.
Yeah.
I correspond a lot with him, and I'll send him a video, and he'll tear it up. You know, he'll say, "Oh, this," but I've come at first. I would really let that bother me because I highly respect his work, and I know he puts in an incredible, probably more than most of us in terms of time, letting it sit, letting it gel, getting it to where you need. He really does put a lot of effort into that, and his pricing is also up there. You're getting what you pay for there with his work. He really is putting in time. But my sort of my little joke is that if I work on a cymbal and I feel like I like it, and then I'll send him a video and it goes, you know, Burke, you know, it's crickets. I'm not getting a reply. It's like, you know, he can't find anything good to say about it. I know it's ready now because that cymbal sells. And it's because he is really much into the old K, jazz specific. He's extremely knowledgeable about it. My cymbals are in no way approaching the old K thing. I'm not going for that.
Yeah.
So that's my little litmus test. After I weed through it all, is this cymbal ready? If he rejects it, it's like, okay, I think it's ready. You know?
It's ready to go. It's ready to go.
Because we're kind of apples and oranges on the way we approach cymbals, but I've learned a ton from him about hammering and stuff, but his experience, because he is working for a particular niche. And so I know that he's aiming for that, and the opinions or advice I get from him, I'm gauging it off of that.
Yeah.
And it's really helpful that I know even though I might not want to go that way, I know where he's coming from. Yeah. And that is a milepost or a marker that I can use so that I'm not playing games with myself. And sometimes he's right. Sometimes I'm like, yeah, he's right. There's too much of this thing going on here and it needs to go. And then it's tricky. You know, I try not to fly too much of my work past too many other cymbal makers for that reason, because I could be easily influenced. And I'm just trying to develop my own sound and my own thing. And stick to that and learn the tough way, what works, what's not, by who buys whatever, you know. And my customer is not the customer that I thought I would end up with. That's the other thing.
What is your customer? How would you describe it?
Well, a non-traditional, somewhat jazz, but it's turning out to be definitely a touch of rock in there with jazz sensibilities. But the hardcore straight up jazz player is, you know, probably is in the 20% mark of, you know, who's buying what. Even though that's where I was anticipating going, because I listen to old school jazz is 95% of what I listen to, with new stuff folded in. I listen to other stuff as well, but as a bass player, I was a prog rocker, you know, and some fusion, not straight ahead jazz. So it's kind of mixed. But I find that interesting and having to deal with that dynamic. So sometimes, you know, the voice you have is not the one you hear, or you know what I'm saying? It's some that can be, and that's fine. I just needed to learn what that is, and I'm slowly figuring that out and embracing that rather than trying to do this hard correction and go that direction. Ride with what's working. You can always kind of veer off at some point and develop something else. But any craft, even if you're music, you know, the bass players that I loved, versus the music that I played, best at, we're not necessarily the same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing applies to cymbal making, and it's just trying to accept oneself. You know?
Yeah, it's like what we said
Where you
earlier
fit in,
about
what you do, find your voice.
Yeah, it's what you said earlier about the blank telling you what it wants to be and just kind of going after that.
Go with that. Yeah,
letting it be what it wants to be instead of imposing your will on it. We all have to do that sometimes. There's kind of like in art, I kind of see it as there's two types of artists. There's the technician, and then there's the more like, well, I guess the other one I would call is like more the artist and the technician are the two different types of, whatever you want to call it. And there's cymbalsmiths that are technicians, and like I hope he's cool with me saying this, but like I would put Nicky Moon kind of more on the technician side.
Absolutely.
It's
he makes a wonderful cymbal that is dependably his style of cymbal. I mean,
right.
You've said it before, another one, and I agree 100%, is that there is a uniformity to his work that is above what the rest of us are doing. We're
the average,
we're a little more amorphous, whereas he's definitely honed that in.
And I would still call him an artist. I'm not saying he's not I'm not saying he's not an artist at all. I just see like you said, there's a pristineness and a refinedness to his sound. Whereas like Collingwood, I have one Collingwood ride. I've only ever played it. It is the funkiest cymbal I've ever played in my life. And he knew he was making it for me. So I think he just was like maybe messing with me a little bit and just what he made for me. Cause I told him, I was like, make me a cymbal. I won't say anything about it. You just make me a cymbal. And he made this super funky thing, but it's still, I can tell even from the videos I've watched of all his work, it's still very Collingwood, which is like, it's not pristine, but it's not, that doesn't imply a lack of technical prowess. It's more like it's almost like an expression of his mind, which is very
an interpretation of sorts. Yeah,
exactly. And I would say the same. One thing I said about Philippe's work, because the first time I'd ever played them was at your booth last year at the Music City Drum Show. And then I also played one, a guy named Michael D'Angelo came to my shop last year, which he's moving back to North Carolina. He was in, I think up in New York. I can't remember if it's New York or LA, but incredible player, but he's moving back to North Carolina. He came to my shop and pulled out his favorite ride, and it was a PGB, and I played it. And 4 or 5 of his rides, what I can tell is he has such a grasp on how to use empty space. And so his cymbals
way of putting that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they don't feel over processed. They feel like he's really intentionally using the stretch between each of the hammer strikes. There's a stretch and a tension that happens between that. And he's got a real handle on that. So it's like, that's his vibe. That's Nicky's vibe. Mangiello is like, it's like if a grunge punk rocker made jazz cymbals, that's Mangiello, and it's got got a flavor to it. I don't know where I got off on saying all that, but like, I kind of see it. We all sort of land between the artist and the technician somewhere. And I see myself, I'm trying to be in the middle, I think is my goal, but I think I err towards the side of just, whatever comes out is what comes out. And it's less like, pristine. Maybe it's going to be a little bit more funky. At least that's what I aim towards. And I find it
learning when to stop
and learn. Yes.
That's
talk about that a little bit. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, okay. In my, Burke's ideal world of a cymbal is that you have a certain continuity from edge to bell to bow, and this is all going harmoniously together. And you're getting a nice metallic sound, but it's not a defined note that's going to clash with something. And so you basically have sterilized this plate at that point. And that is a wonderful, beautiful thing when it sounds like that. That's that type of cymbal. Now, in getting, let's get PGB as an example. I will get cymbals from him that will meet that criteria. And then there will be another cymbal where it has a narrow band of playing zone And then you're going to have the maybe a dip, some barking seal, and then a nice bell. And you could easily interpret that cymbal as being incomplete, unfinished, or whatever. It's not the case. He left it that way on purpose, and it's decoupling that bell from the bow, and that gives you a unique sound, and you should embrace that. If it's giving you the sound you want, there's nothing wrong with the cymbal.
Yep.
I've let cymbals go where they had a slightest little twist to, if you were to put it on a table, you didn't have to one side, it'd sit a little high. And what that does is basically gives you a sort of a gated crash kind of effect. Fast decay on a big thin ride. I will use that to my advantage sometimes. I will not fight to take that out and make a perfectly flat cymbal, because I know now my wash and my sustain is going to increase once I make it a nice uniform dome. The fact that there's one edge that's kicked a little bit, it has an effect on the sound. And if I like the sound, I leave that in it.
Yes.
It doesn't bother me that the cymbal doesn't sit perfectly flat on a table.
Why does that matter? Why does that matter?
It doesn't. And I've seen too many great cymbals that had, if you want to call that an issue, to me, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
It's almost a feature. And I can sit there and tell you why the cymbal sounds like it does because of that. Or let's say, accidentally, I was working around the bell and I put a dent in the side of the bell, messed up. Bang, I just changed the bell entirely. That out is going to change the bell again. Yeah. And I might like the sound of the cymbal with the dent in the bell. Yeah. And I've let them go. I mean, I could hammer that out, but I know if the bell sounds still working for the cymbal, I let go of that standard of perfection, visual, whatever, let it fly and let the ear run with it and be the one that decides how that cymbal is deemed to be completed. And
I think this is what we're talking about here is the benefit of a maker that is also a musician, or at least has that musical ear, because a lot of the bigger manufacturers, they started with people that maybe weren't even musicians or drummers, but they saw the market for, okay, we can make cymbals, and there's a market share we could grab. If you're in that camp, you're not going to understand why a dip in the bell or dip before the bell would be a good thing. You're going to say that's a problem, or that cymbal doesn't sit right, so that's a problem. And that can be an issue. But when you have, people like us sitting down talking about how we make cymbals, designing in flaws or letting flaws exist, there's an intentionality to it that ultimately all ends at the music. And will it do the job when you're preferably with people playing music in a live scenario? Will it inspire you? There's an element of, it's got to inspire you behind the kit, but it also has to do the job. So, the more versatile, we think, like the ping ride, or the rock ride, whatever they call them, the really pingy rides that are really heavy. Sure, that stick definition will cut through anything. It doesn't matter what you got on stage, that stick, that bell is going to cut. Will that be inspiring to you sitting behind it if you're playing in a little trio jazz setting?
Yeah.
Probably not. So there's each end to that, where it's like, okay, you could go all the way this side, and it's like, I'm making a cymbal exactly for the drummer sitting behind the kit, but that leaves out how it's translating and how it serves the music. So we're all kind of trying to find this place with each of our pieces of work. Is we're trying to find a place between that spectrum of fully versatile, fully inspiring, and then when you start to also, I have this desire to help people understand that they need to think in front of their drums. They need to
absolutely let somebody sit in on a gig and go out front and listen. Is
and it's not something that
everything you need to know about.
Right. It's not something that came from me. I learned this from standing behind and I've told the story a million times. For the people that have watched this, I'm sorry, I'm telling the story again. Sitting behind Bernard Purdy, like literally standing right behind him as he played in my jazz band. He like showed up one random day during our rehearsal for big band, comes in, sits in with the band. I stand right behind him and he's playing. And when he went to do a fill and hit the toms, it was like a bomb went off. It was like, it nearly like caught me so off guard. It was so loud the way he hit the toms. And afterwards I was like, what were you doing? I hope I didn't offend him.
But
I
you
was
learn
like,
you could do that, you know,
yeah.
it's okay.
He was just like,
If
oh,
it's
well,
done right.
he was like, it's simple. I'm just mixing myself. I'm thinking about how the kit as a whole sounds in 30 feet in front of the drums. I'm not just thinking about what I hear. Why would I do that? And if, you know, that's the guy to listen to, because that's the guy that's been on how many thousands of records. And
absolutely,
you know, he knows what he's talking about. He knows what the drums are supposed to sound like out in front. And so, you know, for anyone listening, I really encourage you to practice this, like practice thinking past what you hear on the drums and thinking forward. And when you start to do that and you have enough experience letting people sit in on your kit, listening out front, you're going to start to see that your tastes are going to be incorporating some of these concepts, that your tastes are going to change to fall in line with picking the best instrument to do the job. And you're going to start to realize, okay, well, I might think this ride is a little bright, but this is what I want because it's going to do the job when I get on the gig. It's going to translate the way I want my ride cymbal to translate for the music that I play. And that's going to give you the best chance to get gigs, keep gigs, and do what it is that we love, which is play music. You know, we at the end of the day, everything we're talking about boils down to, we love the process of manufacturing these instruments and we love playing them. And that, you know, it has to all be in service of those two things.
And, you know, the trusting your customers' sensibilities is another skill to have as a maker. Like learning to let my first player of note to buy one of my cymbals was Mason Guidry. And man, you know, that guy, phenomenal player. We're in contact all the time. The feedback I get from him is wonderful. He's a beautiful person. And the first cymbal he bought was one that had, in my mind, flaws, you know? And so when he was going through the cymbals, this was at the end of PASIC, and then he was looking for something and was kind of running out of options. And I pulled out one of mine. And usually I'll run to everybody through all the other maker cymbals first before I bring out my stuff. And it's not because it's the best for last. It's like, I'm there to represent the other guys. That's my priority. So they all get first shot at something. And Mason had a different idea of what he was looking for. And I had this one cymbal. It's actually one that I boinked the bell on, you know, and I tried it. I just went ahead and made it this white noise machine. It's really what it's like. Okay, forget it. I'm just going to make this thing be the nastiest, hissiest, thin, big ride crash that I could. And I pulled that out and he started on it and he was like, that's it. That's it. You know, it was nothing like what we started off with. And he took the cymbal, sold it to him. He went off with it. And a couple of days later, I get a call from him. And I didn't pick up the phone at the time for whatever reason. And he left a message. And this was his long message. And he said, Burke, I don't know what to say. This cymbal is, well, I'm not sure what to think of it. And I was thinking, oh God, you know, he's trying to find a way to like tell me that he wants to send it back, you know. And he just goes, I think I need you to make a full set of cymbals for me. It was like because I was listening on the phone and I remember the moment I was almost kind of shaking, like, you know, oh. I've blown my, you know, this opportunity to you know, to work with you know, an incredible musician, and it turned to work out in my favor. But it goes back to the thing is, trust your instincts. And I have to give Mason a lot of credit because he gave me license when I made other cymbals. I would think of him in mind. I know now that, okay, that is a basis of one thing, one sound. We have other sounds that would work well with that, and made cymbals to kind of go along with that. And some of them were ones I already made that I knew that might appeal to him, and then other ones I made with him in mind.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he likes big cymbals. So he has, I think it's 5 rides and a set of 17.5-inch hi-hats.
Amazing.
So it was fun. It was a spoiler because I got to make nice, big, funky, unique cymbals and that's what he wanted. And it doesn't get better than that when somebody just kind of gives you wide open range to just do your thing.
Yeah, full creative
Mason,
license.
thank you so much.
Yeah, he's amazing. He came to Winston-Salem and they did a show. He was with Jonathan Scales, who Jonathan went to my school, actually. I think he graduated maybe the year I started. And one of my Reverie artists, Chazare, he was one of his drummers for a little while. And then Mason took over to the drum chair after, but they were in Winston and I got to meet him and telling stories about like being 11 years old and sitting next to the kit and Vinny Caliuta's playing, or like Vinny would come and pick him up. And he was telling some crazy stories about like the people he's been able to be around. It's wild. That guy is, I mean, he is already one of the modern greats, but as far as where he's going,
it's like, can't wait to see what's coming up next.
Yeah, he's one of the real deals. If you haven't heard of him, certainly someone to check out.
Definitely check him out. Yeah. Some of his, I always use a drummer's single stroke as sort of a point of reference. You can tell instantly by a drummer's single stroke technique, sound, because it's just like drawing a perfect circle. You don't need to be an artist or a drafts person to identify a perfect circle. Everybody knows what a perfect circle looks like. It's extremely difficult to draw a perfect circle freehand. Same thing with single strokes. To me, that is the hardest rudiment there is to do perfectly, because you don't need to be a drummer to know that's not getting it. There's problems here. Yeah, it's a tough measure, actually.
It's very, very easy to identify problems with that.
It is. It is. I struggle with that one. But
it's an easy rudiment, which makes it the hardest one there is.
So when you guys go check out Mason Guidry for the first time, watch the single strokes.
Right.
They're going to send you to the shed. Hard.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Make you cry.
Yeah, I like guys like that, and I also like my favorite drummer, hands down, right now is Dave King. I love that guy's playing. And what I love about his playing is, and I told him, I said this to someone, and I didn't mean to say it, but it came out, and I was like, oh, actually, I kind of like that. He is like, his playing is irreverent. It's irreverent to the art form of drumming intentionally. Like, that guy's got all the technique in the world, and he could sit there and play the most clean single stroke ever, but the way he chooses to play is like so full of imperfection and childlikeness, and almost like mocking the art form of drumming. And but he's doing it at the highest level there is. And so it's a whole vibe. I see that, there's these different schools of thought, and a lot of the chops drummers that I don't find interesting. It's like, it's so clean, but it lacks musical, it lacks musicality, maybe it lacks inspiration a little bit. And then there's the ones that are really weird and out there, and maybe it lacks form and technique. And it's like people that can kind of marry. It's the same conversation as like the technician and the artist, and where people fall within that spectrum.
Drumming in general is become weird to me since social media, Instagram. Everybody that you see sounds the same. Like I will get, your players of note like Dave King or Mason, they're not going to come across your feed as regularly, as quickly as these, just Joe Blows who are really competent drummers. But what I'm finding in that genre, that group, that demographic, is uniformity of sound and chops, and they're doing wonderful athletics everywhere across the kit. But I would not, as a bassist, and that's really my point of reference, as a bassist, I'm going, God, I wouldn't want to play with that guy. I just would not want to be in that band.
Right.
Dynamics have taken a hit. Use of space has taken a hit. And I wonder where that's going to go, how that's going to play out, because maybe it just automatically does. Maybe it's just the information I'm being fed that's skewing things. When I try to put a gauge on the direction of drumming, taste, styles, technique, all of that, it's weird. I've actually, the more information I get, the worse it gets to try to decipher it, because I don't have a necessarily an understanding of where it's all coming. Why is it coming to me? I know it has to do with an algorithm.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I checked out one guy. To go in a little deeper, now that feed is, you know, bombarding me with that type of stuff, and
right.
It's like, I don't know. So I try to stir it up, but it's difficult.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with a buddy of mine this morning, actually, and we were talking about how it was a depressing, very depressing conversation, but we were talking about how our brains are being trained, are being dumbed down actively by the technology we have, and how it almost takes a determination. It takes discipline and determination to fight that, because if you don't fight it, it just happens. You know, you find yourself, oh, I'm bored. What do I do? And you just pull your phone out, you just start scrolling, and then all of a sudden 30 minutes has passed and all you've done is just like mindlessly scrolled. And it's the easy route. And so I was saying, like, the most dangerous thing is not being fully addicted to it, like no choice. The most dangerous thing is saying, well, I could stop if I wanted to, but one more video, you know, one more, and you keep going. It's, and I think it really does, like, downstream really affects our, well, one, quality of life, but also just our art suffers greatly because we lose patience. And boredom is one of the most beautiful things in life, because it's the impetus and the catalyst for creativity to happen. If you're bored, you got to figure out. Yeah. Discovery. Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I'm 55. I'm old enough to remember one phone in the kitchen, rotary dial, 4 channels on TV. You had to get up off the couch to change the channel. It was black and white when I first, was as far back as I can remember, and make it through the home computer to internet to where we are now with phones and constant connectivity.
Yeah.
And one thing that I know that fuels me, because I've done a lot of different things, is hitting that point where, okay, I'm bored. Oh, I'll get up and go do something, and go get engrossed in something just for the sake of getting up off the couch. There was no distraction. In other words, if I wanted to be entertained, I had to go entertain myself.
Yeah.
And that has its own reward cycle to it. So it compels you to keep going, and one thing leads to another, and who knows where it's going to go. You can, like you're saying, you can just waste 2 hours scrolling on your phone. COVID, I got sucked into moments of that. You know, it wasn't working. Nothing was going on. I was enjoying the quiet and sitting on the porch, and also developing an assessment of, like, having the time to actually see what social media was about, because I never really messed around much with Facebook or Instagram or any that sort of thing until the dead time came. And it's like, I better go see what everybody else, what all the hoopla is.
Right.
And I would find that getting sucked into it, and it would be like, wake up. You just blew 2 hours when I know that I wanted to go or had to go do something else and didn't do it.
Yeah.
And so for kids today that are starting off this way,
it's very worrisome.
I'm starting to sound like the old man, 40 years ago in my day, we would never, but there is something to that.
I feel very lucky. I'm turning 32 next week. And I honestly feel like I was the very last, like, my age group was the very last group of people ever that had a childhood without technology to the extent. Obviously we had TV, and, there were video games. I had an N64 video game when I was little, but, like, it wasn't so baked into the culture that, kids were just throwing an iPad when they were screaming. You know what I mean? It was, when you were bored, you went outside and you ran around in the woods. And I feel like I was really a part of the last group, maybe, the last group ever to have, like, half of my childhood was pure in that way of I had to entertain myself. I played drums a ton when I was bored. I played outside when I was bored. I played sports. I had
so important.
And then
so important.
Yeah. And then I got a smartphone when I was 18. That was, like, brand new. Smartphones were out, and I had that smartphone, and it just totally, I mean, even just having it at 18, it's changed my life in so many ways, just, for better and for worse. And I worry about what people are like now and what culture is going to be like in 50 years when the people running the world are the people that were born and raised on this, and that is it's a scary thought, but I will say at the same time, like, I think obviously this entire conversation is happening because of the connectivity that we have.
Absolutely. It's why I'm talking to you. It's why I'm talking to all the other cymbalsmiths.
And
because of the iPhone,
Exactly. I don't know how long our call's been going so far, but it's a long format discussion. I'm not going to cut out anything. We're going to put this whole thing up. And what's happening with that is there's a demand for that. And I think it is in some small way a representation that we're not totally giving in to all of the short attention span, short, like 15-second videos, scroll for 10 hours. We're actually starting to engage. We're engaging long format discussions. A lot of people are becoming cymbalsmiths, which you have to be a crazy person to get into this industry and to spend the years it takes to like get the technique down and to make, we're desperate for something tactile because everything is so digital these days. We want something that's a little bit more real, and we want to play music with other people. We don't want to just sit in our basement and record videos and try to grab the 15 seconds where we sounded the best and had that really cool lick, and then we post that. And we're sick of that. I really think that's happening.
I'm detecting a change. I used to early on sort of gripe and grumble about, millennials and the disconnect that I felt with them. And given some time and I'm seeing them putting resistance up to the very things that I'm griping about, that they're realizing that somehow somebody is stealing their valuable time, taking them away from doing things they could be doing, feeling the void, and they're making the steps to suss through it all and get some value out of life or things. And they're actually doing a pretty damn good job, as much as we want to gripe. But the reality is that they're living in a different reality than I remember, even you remember, that they're actually in many ways doing quite well, given the circumstances, and comparing it to something that's, 40 years ago, my point of reference as a teenager. It's apples and oranges again, and you really can't weigh them. Some things are identical, things are completely different. Yeah. It's a tough call to make. But I now give them a lot more credit and a lot more, I wouldn't say cutting them slack. If anything, I'm trying to actually learn from them a little bit now, because I see they're helping me in a way deal with the bullshit that I don't understand or get. At least I have because they're questioning it at all. And, COVID and this younger generation, I think the mindset of part of this influx of people diving into cymbal making or whatever was brought on by possibly the gig economy, time on your hand, time off from a regular job. And you start to realize, why am I grinding away at $8 an hour? And this is going to go nowhere. And I don't have any real options. I don't, when I would get promoted to, part-time manager and make $12 an hour, it's like, you can't get by on that. I'm talking about just kind of bullshit work, entry-level jobs, that they are realizing that is not a way to go. You might have to do that to get in and get going. It's a necessary step in your growth, but they're branching out and creating new businesses, simple things. And that's what the beauty of is, that you could actually monetize something really stupid that takes nothing to get started up. And cymbal making in a way is like that. I mean, it's a little expensive, but like compared to woodworking, it's cheap, because you're gonna piece parts. You can make your tools for the most part and scrounge and scrap together what you need to get started. With woodworking, you're gonna, every tool is many hundreds of dollars, if not thousands of dollars. You'll buy used and move on up the ladder, but it's a different scenario. But cymbal making is an appealing thing. I watched the same thing happen with acoustic guitar making during the late 80s, early 90s. And I think what that was, you had your boomers were beginning to retire, and on their bucket list was, I've always wanted to have a woodworking shop, because they remember their kid, their granddad making stuff, or the dad making stuff. And they want to make either a canoe, a sailboat, or an acoustic guitar. Those were the
Yeah.
The bucket list things. And at the time, there was this renaissance of acoustic guitar making. Everybody became an acoustic guitar maker.
Yeah.
Partly also because generationally it was available, it resonated with them. The other was that you had Grizzly tooling, so you could now buy Taiwanese woodworking tools for cheap, brand new. For $3,000, you could outfit your shop in 1989 with Taiwanese tools that were decent tools. And then it faded away, and that's going to happen with cymbal making. It's going to be the exact same thing. There's going to be an influx of people that dive into it, and some people are going to fall out of love with it. At the end, it's your ability it's your love of whatever it is, and how you're going to stick with it. And for me, I have sort of a 2-year thing for me. I've noticed that if I stick with something for 2 years with a degree of devotion, you will inevitably end up getting traction. And it can make you can now go next level after about 2 years time.
Yeah.
You've put in some dues, and you'll start to reap the rewards from that. That's what I think most cymbal makers are going to be up against. Is you're going to have to have a certain skill set going in. You're not necessarily going to be able to, swinging a hammer is not just swinging a hammer.
Right.
There is more to it, and it's going to take you 2 years to learn how to swing a hammer.
Right.
Effectively.
Yeah. It's true. And then past the 2-year mark, there's a 5-year. There's a 5-year mark and then a 10-year mark. I have a buddy who told me, he was like, he was talking to a friend of mine about, and he's a fairly successful musician, and my buddy was saying, like, how do I make it in the music industry? And he's like, I will tell you exactly how to make it in the music industry. And if you follow what I'm going to say, I guarantee you will be successful. And he goes, okay, cool. And he goes, all right, you ready? Do it for 10 years.
Yeah.
Period.
I totally agree with that. In 10 years, you are leagues ahead of everybody else. In terms of if you stuck with whatever it is for 10 years, you are there.
Yes.
You are,
It's the 10,000 hour, 10-year rule, kind of. It's probably related to that, but it's like, if you can, and if you're willing, it's like, what is the cost? What's the cost of becoming a cymbal maker? Well, there's costs in the tools, and you got to make them, you got to practice and whatever. The cost of really doing it and really like making it, 10 years. Are you willing to give 10 years of your life to anything? Maybe, and I think that as humans, we need something like that. That's kind of the discussion of like meaning in our lives. Like, what's the point of waking up every day? And if you lack meaning, then there's a lot of issues that come from that. And we find little hobbies and things to do to give us motivation in our life, and obviously belief systems. And if we have faith, or if we don't have faith, or whatever it is, like, we as humans we have a need for there to be meaning in some way. And I think that it's a good exercise for younger people. I mean, I'm young still, but like people that are 18, 17, trying to figure out what they want to do with their life. It's like, okay, it's less about what you pick and more about picking something and really doing it, like really giving it your all. So is it music? Okay. Sit down and practice your single stroke roll until it sounds like Mason's, and like, if you really devote yourself to something and invest 10 years of your life into something, there's a really good chance, barring tragedy, accident, or illness, there's very good chance that you'll get where you'll get somewhere. You can't, there's not that's kind of the whole thing of an adventure. There is no adventure without danger and the possibility of failure. So that's a whole nother discussion with it. But I think we
need to start this 10-year rule with cymbal pricing.
Yes.
Well, let's not hope it doesn't take 2 years. It's actually going to take 2 years, I think, for it to come around.
Right.
And I kind of want to bring the topic back up again.
Let's go.
Maybe you edit it back into where, before it branched off, but it's going to be imperative for us to evaluate our worth of our cymbals. And I'd also want to make the argument that I hear this all the time when I give a price of a cymbal, and it's using Koei as an example because they are the highest price cymbal that I carry, and some people flinch. and they're like, oh, that's more than I want to spend. And the immediate voice in my head is, well, go play another gig next week and come back with your $200 and you will be closer,
Right.
Wait, get what you want. Don't let the price of that throw you off. I would argue that a weekend warrior, drummer can definitely justify $800,000-$900,000 cymbal, handmade, something if it's exactly what they want, because they're going to play it for decades.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to make money off of that. They can pay it off. If they're in a working band, you can write it off.
Yeah.
There's no way you can justify or rationalize yourself out of what you want for a couple or 400 extra dollars.
Right.
It is worth holding out for. And it's a stupid mentality. And the other thing is that I think from the cymbal maker standpoint, when you make a cymbal and you sell it at a price that resonates with mass-produced cymbals, you're taking a hit. You're not going to get royalties back on that. You're not kind of covering your ass for all the years of learning that, they'd say, well, yeah, I can't go charge for stuff I didn't know what I know. No, actually you do, because, you've now arrived, and you owe it to yourself to meet a standard of living for a specialized skill that you've learned the hard way. There is value in that.
Yeah.
And it should be taken into account. And in my little informal survey, regardless, I talked to a cymbalsmith who was of the first round of cymbalsmiths, who's been at it for a long time, up to some newer guys. And they all said the same thing. Well, Zildjian prices their cymbals around. I've always priced my cymbal around the, the upper end Zildjian and pasty stuff. And I was like, well, why? And they're like, no, I get it. That was the answer. I see. And they know this, and I know it, and I'm sure everybody who's sitting down with a pencil knows this. If another factor too, there's another cymbalsmith who has relatively high, if not, no, actually pretty high prices compared to everybody right now. And he has a monstrous waiting list.
Mm.
Your cymbal is too cheap. I don't give a shit. It's too cheap. If you've got the goods and people are lining up and willing to wait for it, you've got the goods. One luthier I met at NAMM show has a 5-year waiting list, and he brought a couple guitars, put a premium on them, and if somebody wanted to spend the money and can jump out of line and afford it, the guitars were like $30,000 a piece.
He sold both,
on
didn't
the first day.
Yeah, he sold both.
He was just kicking around. It was martini time after that.
Right.
And it's like, how do you develop? Now, I can hear musicians bristling. Okay, well, these are just millionaires that have a collection of guitars and they're not being played by musicians. And it's like, no, they're being played by either the best musicians and millionaire collectors. And it doesn't matter if you're a guitar maker. Wouldn't you like to make a cool, 90 grand in a day?
Mm.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah.
It's not your duty to make everything affordable to everybody else. And that sounds like an asshole thing to say, but it's not. You're putting in the time. You're the one blowing out your wrist, trashing your ears to chase after something you love. And even if that doesn't make rational sense, it's still a value that has to be incorporated in, and you owe it to yourself. And it's one thing if you're a single guy and you're living in a apartment and working in your garage and whatever, it still applies to you. As opposed to the guy who maybe got it in his garage and he's got a family and the day gets broken up because he has to take the kid to camp or the pool or whatever, he mixes it all up together. All of these things count. It all adds up, and we should be valuing our work to that degree under that spotlight, and we're not doing it. Yeah. And I would love to hear what other people have to say. Like maybe if you ever have Paul Francis on, who now has the many years in a large company situation, who's now doing it, and so I'd love to hear what he has to. I'm sure he's arrived at a certain standard of living it's now plateaued or taken care of. It's a little different when you're many years into it versus starting out. Yeah. But he's still going to have to maintain that standard of living, possibly, I don't know what
Yeah.
the circumstances are, by hand hammering cymbals. And his prices are what, middle seven, something like that for 22, maybe.
Yeah.
I think that's what I've heard. I haven't seen, but I would bet that he would come out saying, I think that's still too low.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And even though he can be higher than us because he has the recognition and the experience and all the things that are valuable insights that he can bring to the table, but at the same time, I bet he will still come to the same conclusion that it's not enough.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
I'm feeling personally a little convicted here listening to you talk.
I know. Oh, I am pitching, but
it's good. It's good though.
It's no different. Making cymbals are no different than making a freaking kitchen cabinet. It's the same freaking thing.
Yeah.
And if you can't do a kitchen cabinet, which is I can do in my sleep,
yeah.
you know, it's not a creative process, and I can charge that much money to do that, I definitely should be charging more.
Yeah.
For something that has a hell of a long learning curve to it and is more unique and across the board. It's just, there are parallels. They are real things. And I don't think we're taking it into account.
2 points on that. I think all that's amazing. 2 points. 1 point is the kitchen cabinet doesn't in turn make you money. So your point earlier about how you're going to go play gigs with a cymbal, it's going to make you money. Second point, kind of piggybacking off of that, is if you were to say, okay, I'm going to buy this cymbal, and this cymbal, I'm going to have this cymbal for 20 years. I'm going to play it on 20 years worth of gigs. Okay. Extrapolate out. What does that mean? The cost happens per time you sit down at it. If you're going to play it for the next 20 years, would you buy a cymbal today, knowing that every time you play it for however long or however short, every time you play it, you are going to spend 0.2 of a penny? And it's just going to come out of your bank account every time you sit down? Would you take the cymbal with you right now?
Would you care? Yeah.
Would you care at all if you knew that was the case? That's kind of the ultimate trump card of this whole thing of, you know, a ride cymbal for $1,000. Is it worth it? Okay, well, are you going to have it for 10 plus years? Okay, do a little calculation in your brain. Would you be able to do it to where, you know, it's only going to cost you under a penny every time you play it? And then it's also going to make you money. So factor that in. It's going to be totally paid for. And yeah,
it's probably going to sound even better in 20 years because the runs is mellowed out and hit the sweet spot. And you can at least sell it and get some of that money back if you decided you wanted to sell it. It might even go up in value if you chose the correct artist. And, you know, I remember well when Spizzichino passed away, that month, I was ready. I was going to justify spending the $800 to get myself. I just wanted to have it. And I couldn't rationalize it as a player because I wasn't, you know, I was just doing weekend warrior gigs, you know, but I knew I wanted a fine example of something. And then he passed away. I waited. And then instantly the value of his cymbals doubled right then and there that day.
That moment.
And I hesitated for all the same reasons everybody else does. Well, it costs more than, you know, everything else. And
right.
I equivocated and then dragged my feet. And I've always been one to support artists and local businesses and things like that. So I was about to apply that to cymbals before I even really knew I was going to be here talking about them. You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Just do it. Just do it, you know?
Right. That's good. I'm going to take it some time and reevaluate. I think, my reasoning currently is the market, the customer market, these people are trained. We're all trained, you know, to know what should gas cost or what does. We're upset because gas is too, we've been trained that gas should be cheaper. We're trained to know how much a shirt costs, you know. And so this idea of like a premium shirt that costs $75, okay, what's the point in that? You know, things. So there's that
different.
Yeah, that is a little different. You're right.
Yeah.
But that goes into it. I think that goes into
that's branding, but
right. That goes into the process of it. And then, you know, I'm able to justify my pricing right now because I have another brand driving the bus for my overall company. But my goal this year is to make each brand drive its own bus. That's really the goal, is like, you know, I don't want to have any like loss leaders. I want everything to be as profitable as it can be. Right now, the drums,
it should be.
and it should be, the drums behind me, you know, if you look back at many years I've been making drums, the drums all behind me are going to sell, and I will sell them all at a loss if I account for, you know, accounting for the history of me making them. Even if they were priced double what they are, I will sell them at a loss. And that's just kind of like the state of things right now. And it's, you know, my creative energy is with cymbals right now.
Another factor involved with your drums too is that you have a lot of parts.
Oh yeah, huge. That's the biggest factor.
So that's driving that price, and that's a competitive edge for other makers if they're buying 1,000 lugs versus, you know, 200 lugs.
Right.
It's the only way that you can. Yeah, it's a tough one. Cymbal is definitely more. You know, it's a fixed amount of cost for your blank, and then the rest of it is labor. You know,
this guy. Yeah.
But anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's basically it. It's you know, for me, I think there are utilitarian products. I think that my stack ring stuff is pretty utilitarian, pretty simple. There's not a lot of artistic feel that goes in. I have, you know, there's a lot of artistic feel and energy that went into the creation of them. I spent many hours prototyping everything we sell, but at this point, it's at a stage where they're all systematized, and there's a formula for how do I make a Versa stack? How do I make a K stack? It's all bullet points, very simple. I can train anyone to do it. And drums are a little bit that way too, because it's just this round piece of wood. You got to drill it in the right place, you know. So I can justify like costs being in line with other manufacturers for that reason. When I go out there to the anvil and I sit down with a piece of bronze, I am pour, and this sounds so pretentious to say, but it's just the truth. I pour everything I have into that piece. Yeah. I never disconnect myself from the sound, what's happening in the metal. It's
a very psychological element to the whole thing.
It is.
It's why it's so hard to price.
Right. And it's a piece of art in a lot of ways.
There, you know? And
it's the idea of it is really, you know, if you want to get into the cymbal, into the independent makers, it's like thinking of us. And this, again, I'm sorry, I'm sounding pretentious right now. Thinking of us all as artists. We are, you know, like I had an artist make this tattoo. I just went to this guy and was like, I like your work, do something on my arm. And I knew I wanted it to be kind of Gothic cathedral sort of thing. And I just had him do something. It was like, I picked an artist that I liked their voice as a maker. And I went to them for that. And when you go to all the big brands, I can name all of them. You're not doing that. You're just getting something that, you know, maybe upwards of 30 people have touched it. And so it's an amalgamation of all these just workers. And, you know, not to crap on the guys in Turkey, but like they are just cycling in young men, training them on a technique. They use up their bodies. They, you know,
it's a race to the bottom sort of thing.
It is. It really is. And so then they just, you know, once their arms are shot, they just throw them out and get another batch of new guys.
Yeah.
So
well, the same thing going back to my woodworking experience, which was, I chose a niche early on, which was doors and windows for historical buildings. And when it came to other millwork, I tried to keep it as interesting and high end as possible. And I did intentionally, here's the elitist thing, I stayed out of subdivisions. These were people that could afford my work, but I'd have to fight to get it. I had to convince them that they were getting value here. And that was the thing. They're educating the customer what they're getting. Their mindset by a demographic was, you ordered your kitchen and from a factory, and you know their standard sizes and door front, and you just dress the Barbie doll. And trying to get them to understand that no, we can fit the proportions of your room and make it all look contiguous, dialed in, like the house was born with that millwork in it. And then again, back to the doors and windows, it was a skill set that other cabinet shops would not want to get into because it took too long to do. So it allowed me a way to branch off and be one of the few people who would entertain making old school double hung windows the hard way. And that gave me a niche. When I moved to Charlottesville, I chose Charlottesville because it was an affluent town with my skill set. I know as skilled labor, you go where the money is. Same thing is going to apply to cymbals. We're not trying to apply to students here.
Yeah.
Maybe intermediate guys might start to stick their toe into that because they want something of some quality, but all the same parameters and forces that be apply. And you have to treat your stuff as something special. If you don't treat it as something special, nobody else is.
Yeah. No one will care. Yeah.
Nobody will care. And who's gonna, so you saved all these musicians, all this money along the way. Who's gonna be there for you at the end of your career? You've denied yourself.
Right.
This is America. We are capitalist.
Yeah.
And if you don't fend for yourself, that's your fault.
Right. Yeah. It's a harsh reality, but it is a reality at the end of the day. If you undercut yourself, I mean, this applies to being a musician too. I mean, it's kind of the thing of younger guys will be willing to go do the gig for $50. And so the old timers don't get their job, and because it's like, oh, we're getting these young kids in there. But then how, I did that. I did the same thing.
I've done it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had to fight super hard to get out of that. I was pigeonholed for a time because there's that transition in your 20s where you're like, okay, I got to make money. Unless I want to go work at McDonald's, I got to start making some money. I can't do a travel date, be gone for 3 days and get $50 in a meal. I can't do that.
No,
yeah.
The old play for exposure, thing, or slightly better, $50 in a meal. And then when you find out when you get there that it's not really a meal off the menu, you can have anything in the sandwich section that you want.
Right.
He's not going to even $40 steak dinner, that cost him $15 to make.
Right. Right.
Screw that.
Yeah. It says there is this stuff really does apply and then at the end of the day, I've watched a lot of my buddies that currently are in their 40s that did what I did, kind of was on the path I was on in my 20s and when they were young, where they were just hustling, doing every gig they could, take a gig for $25, take a gig for $100, whatever. And then they get to their 40s, they've got a family, 4 kids.
Everything changes.
Their wife had to work full time. And then all of a sudden it's like, maybe there's marital issues or whatnot. And it's like, oh gosh, and then they rush to start businesses or whatever it is. And then they're starting
go get a day job.
Right.
They put down the musician thing and just go get a day job because they're tired of it. And I mean, there's a certain amount we have to accept that the audience is, for whatever reason, is entertained by a DJ.
Yeah.
I don't get it. Doesn't resonate with me at all, but it's a thing. And a bar owner is going to love that if he's got a room full of people dancing and slugging, drinks.
Right.
And this guy only, he has to pay this DJ $300.
Right.
He wouldn't pay a band $300.
Right.
Unless they could pull that kind of crowd. And that's another thing too, man, with musicians. Just because you can play guitar, look at YouTube. There's tons of 8-year-olds out there ripping up stuff I couldn't play until my 20s.
Yeah.
Don't put your shit out there until it's good enough.
Right.
I mean, really, Gab, if you have a good product, there is a market for it, whatever the it is. Don't be so eager to jump out there and sell yourself short, because like you were saying, once you get pigeonholed into that, it's hard to say, oh, I'm not doing your gig anymore for $50 a man. I want $250 for each man in the band. I want $1,000 for my band. You have to rationalize that because you have to make that guy money to let you play there. It's all interconnected.
It's all, and it's not, don't think of it as like evil capitalism.
No.
It's the way it works. And it's like, people have to eat, people have to be taken care of, but you also have to understand that business owner he's dollars and cents. Like if you come in and you're like, well, it's $1,000 for the band, and you're going to put 20 people in the room that are going to maybe buy 2 drinks. And so he's going to pay out of his own pocket upwards of $500 or $600 to pay you to play music. And you think, so it's like there's this economy that, we have to understand. It's like, okay, if you're going to charge what you're going to charge, you got to deliver the goods. but at the same time, you also have to know your worth and not undercut yourself. And so it's a delicate, it's a
there are ways to
dance
get there.
kind of, you know what I mean?
There's a way to get there. You know, when you're talking a band that you want a flat rate to play, you know, the way you get to it being $1,000 band is you separate, you're going to have to do some relatively free stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You choose your venues where, I don't know, it could be fairs, fundraisers, parties, things where you develop an audience, and then you go play somewhere for the door and you pack the house now because you now have a fan base.
Yep.
Then you're valid to the bar owner,
right,
that's going to hire you. You don't just go in there and expect to get paid or accept a low rate and then try to negotiate your way up. Like, I mean, you can come out strong once you have something to bring to the table that is now going to catch somebody else. You've got people's ears interested, and now you've got the club owner's wallet interested. And those are the two things you have to do. And you have to strategically get from point A to point B, but you want to publicly arrive at the right time. You don't want to do this little half-ass thing and then kind of meekly try to edge up there. It won't work.
You'll get laughed
at.
Look
like a real deal.
Yeah.
You have to be professional about it in some way.
Right.
And be serious. You know, take your club owner seriously, and maybe they'll take you seriously.
Yeah. And understand that, like, if you do that, you know, knowing the value of what you carry, it's like you can confidently approach that bartender and say, hey, or the venue owner and say, well, this is how much it costs to have us, and we will pack it out. This is how many people will be there. And, you know, you're going to walk away with a cool $1,000 for paying us $1,000. You'll get $2,000 you know, obviously we don't know the internals of, you know, any particular venue, but it's like, if you can offer that, then if a bar owner can look at you, or venue owner can look at you and say, well, you know, they're expensive, but they'll pack the house out. When we pack the house out, this is how much we'll make, and I'll pay my staff, and then this is how much I'll have as a take home. And then it's like, okay, great, sign me up. You know, you shake hands and you go do it. That's the kind of that is the world we live in. And I mean, there's a whole discussion about currently happening about that's more on the political side that I definitely want to avoid talking about this kind of stuff. But it's a good thing to play the game, because at the end of the day, you can provide, like for me, I like look at every cymbal I have, and I think about the life it's going to have away from me. You know, as I'm packing it up or whatever to ship it out, it's like, I'm only like doing half the job, and the rest of it is like, this person is going to take this thing, and the goal is for that cymbal to inspire someone for decades. And it's like, thinking about that, it's like, if I can provide that value, I feel like that's a inherent good. I'm actually serving.
It's a contribution.
Yeah, it's a contribution to the drumming world, the music world. It's like, I want to make cymbals that go on records that, you know, that inspire other people. So the inspiration kind of snowballs of, like, I have this little part to play in making this one part of the drum kit for the drummer to play on the record, and then they go tour it, and then they whatever, and then it has this whole life. And it's like, yes, we got to play the ugly, businessy, capitalist game, but that's the result of it is I would call it a good, you know. And there's obviously evil. Capitalism unfettered without a sense of morality can be evil, you know, and it can be about using and abusing people and abusing your workers. And but like, for me, it's like, when we play this game correctly with a moral compass, you know, I want to build a company, and I want to bring in employees, and I want my employees to love their job. I want to pay them well. I want to inspire them.
We're not talking about gouging here and getting maximum dollar for everything at all the time. No, but fair. Realistically, honestly fair.
Fair. And I, you know, I literally said earlier this podcast, for the first 4 years of my business, I paid myself under $2 an hour to work 70 plus hours. And I was even like privileged and fortunate enough to have my parents step in and help me with the business. And my dad's company was a capital investor. And so, like, I had support systems and structures that helped me do that, but I still sacrificed when I could have gone and gotten a job for $15, $20 an hour and had a typical career. And so there's a sacrifice that I have made to build what I have. And hopefully people like the product that I make. But then beyond that, there's this whole idea of creating a sense of community and bringing in people and giving people a place to work so they don't have to go get a McDonald's job. Like, wouldn't, if I was 18, 19, in my 20s, whatever, and I could come work at Reverie as opposed to, I don't know, like Lowe's Hardware, like any day I would be like, oh, put me in the drum company. That, for me personally, because I love drums, it's like we are adding a lot of value, I think, to the market. And I think the reason there's so many independent cymbalsmiths and independent makers, boutique makers of instruments, is because people are starting to get tired of the big box thing. They're getting tired of just the cookie cutter crap. And it's like, I spent $2,000 on this snare drum. Like one time I had a guy bring a snare drum in from a brand I won't mention, but like he spent $2,000 on the snare drum. And he was like, I just can't get it to tune right. Like, could you help me out? I take it apart, and whoever put it on the jig to cut the snare beds had cut it offset. So the snare bed was here and the butt and the throw were here. And so I was like, that's why, and he's like, oh my gosh, I literally spent $2,000. And it's just one of the major manufacturers. And I have seen that happen. I've seen stuff like that come through my shop consistently. It happens all the time. But that's not going to happen with a Reverie drum, a Reverie drum kit. That's not going to happen with a Burke's Works cymbal. Burke is going to be, you are like obsessing over the sound, and you're there's an artistic approach to it. There's even like a vulnerable sense of letting go a cymbal that's a little imperfect and letting it live its life. And that is not something you get with the kind of, big box thing. That's my end of my rant, but
that's a fine rant it was. and it's all very valid. And again, back to the price thing. As an example, I was always used to buying cheap vacuum cleaners. $150 Target special, Kmart special. It worked barely well enough. They would go out of production. You couldn't get bags, or they'd burn up and quit for no reason. Finally got fed up and dropped $800 on a Miele, and kicking myself out. I was like telling myself, I cannot believe I'm going to spend $800 on a vacuum cleaner. But I was fed up, and also at the time had several cats, so I
needed it.
Some way to get something for real. That was one of the best purchases I ever made in my life. It's quiet. One pass across the carpet, it looks like it's new. It's it run forever. It's a wonderful machine. I got what I paid for, and the truth is that after 48 hours, I was over the fact that it cost so damn much.
Right.
Really didn't. Did I feel it anymore? No.
Yeah.
I was over it.
Yeah.
Drummers out there, take that into mind when you're looking at somebody's artwork, somebody's craft. You're getting something special, and you get to talk to that particular person. That's the other thing. You have an issue. We're all accessible.
Right.
Go that way. And also with Bronze Pie, when I'm dealing with people with purchases for anybody's cymbal, I do reference videos for them. So I might have my little sound file up there, a little video thing, but I will A/B other cymbals, and there's probably a minimum of a week to 2 weeks of trading comments and videos before. And I've only had 2 returns in the 3 years I've had Bronze Pie going. And that's because I spend a lot of time making little reference videos. And then it's allowed me to, I've also stuck to the cheap auxiliary smartphone microphone, because as much as I'd like to have a really high-end audio signal there, and I'm a little bit embarrassed that my my audio files sound that they do, everybody is familiar with that sound. And I found that the professional players suss through that right off the bat. Once they know that you're not using the highest quality equipment, and I tell them that it's what it is, it's a Shure microphone running through my phone is how I'm doing the video. It doesn't faze them, because they can hear what they need to hear.
Right.
I'm suffering on the beginner side of things because I'm not giving them that super sweet sound that would instantly hook them, but I'm not about hooking anybody. I don't
Right.
want to try to hook somebody because that's a good chance of disappointment.
Yeah,
And
when you
and
hook somebody, there are definitely some makers out there. Definitely won't name them, but there are makers out there that are deceptively editing their videos and doing things in certain ways to capture certain things, and they're EQing and doing all this stuff. So you're sitting there watching the video going, oh my gosh, this is the best sounding cymbal. And it's that thin. How in the world does it sound like that? And the truth is it doesn't sound like that. You know, it's
no.
there's stuff going into that, you know, and that, you know, I think that kind of stuff is going to come back around and bite certain makers. Because I think
It
even
is.
just this kind of stuff,
has.
like these videos, like you can't hide with this kind of compressed, crappy audio. Like the sound of the cymbal is going to come through, and if it's garbage cymbal, it will sound garbage on that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So there's a level of naive honesty in that, using this, you know, very simple format to present it across to the customer. They're forgiving in that regard, surprisingly so. Now, I don't know. I'm sure I've turned off a lot of potential customers because they might get on the site and then, like, you know, the sound quality of these files are mediocre. Then that's okay.
Right.
You know, usually when somebody's made the effort to email me, contact me, and establish a conversation, we're off to a good start. Somebody's actually interested and willing to be patient, and they love the fact that I'm giving, you know, umpteen videos, you know, close mic across the room, compared to this, compared to that, jazz beat versus rock beat, you know, giving them some context that one video doesn't give.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm also getting to know that person in the process too. So I might go, you know, really that you're looking at this cymbal, but why don't we consider this one here?
This one might be better for what you want.
For what you're looking for. And it all helps. It all helps.
It's true.
Getting somebody's attention and engagement is the main thing, I think, with internet sales.
Yeah.
Really.
And it is
no problem. You just hand a pair of sticks and say, hey, if you need something,
have fun.
I'm gonna stay out of your way.
Yeah.
That's the way I do it there. Online is different. We talk, we hold hands, we text, you know, 11 o'clock at night, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And we get to the bottom of it.
Yeah. What you said, I with my videos, I have these, which I'm not using the mic so I can put it in the camera. This is a SR25 Earthworks, really nice mic. I won it. I did not pay for it. And it's been great, but it's kind of a mic that's better suited for acoustic guitars. I think it's really bright. It kind of, it's not very natural sounding to what I'm hearing. It's more like it kind of boosts the top end, and it's rolled off on the low end. Which with cymbals are already bright. Like I want low end really, you know, because I want to hear the life of the cymbal. I don't want to hear just the metallic part, because that's going to translate regardless of the mic you use. But what I try to do, figuring out what I was trying to say. What I try to do is I try with the demos is to play in a like a wide dynamic range. I watch a lot of demo videos of makers that are playing super, super quietly on the cymbal, and then they're doing like a jazz beat and they're playing around it, but it's all just like right there at the cymbal. And, you know, my question is like the biggest thing to look out for is what happens when you dig in. Where is that point at which that wash is going to overtake? What's the threshold with this cymbal? And if you're just playing it super soft, you know, you can have the thinnest, most wobbly looking thing, and it can sound like it has a ton of stick, but it doesn't have a ton of stick, you know, and that might sound great to you behind it. But again, the conversation we had before, will it translate? No.
I'm doing more 2-stick demos now. You know, I'll take a 5A or 5B and like our AJ2 or AJ3. So it's definitely a thin wispy jazz stick, and then sort of a meatier mid-range rock stick. And it makes a huge difference in giving information to the listener. And I'll say so. And even on some videos, I've even done some with a piece of tape on it. Because I mean, that's something that I personally like. You know, I like a cymbal to be a tad brighter than I would really want it to sound, because when you put it in a live environment, that's going to disappear. But the other thing is that if you're in a recording situation, you know, a piece of tape can
Yeah.
bring it right in where you need it, and you can get where you can't make a cymbal brighter,
Right.
other than maybe changing a stick, and that's going to change the way it feels. And I don't want to do that. My stick is my constant for me as a player.
Right.
I change the other parameters, and I'll change a stick as a last resort.
Yeah.
But I like to change other things first. If not,
That's
change the entire different cymbal. I would do a jazz gig. I'd carry 2 or 3 rides, because if I'd never been to that venue and I get there and I've got a brick wall here and plate glass behind me, well, I know I'm grabbing my Zildjian K custom dry that I had.
Yep.
That cymbal saved my ass so many times for screwed up situations in small venues. And
very true. That's what you just said is like a perfect apply it as a buyer. That what you just said, it's like a touch brighter than you think, so that it will cut, having options.
And a touch more complex than you think, possibly, as well.
Right.
I'd even throw that in there.
Right.
It's
Absolutely.
Complexity, getting to know your kit out front, or your cymbal from out front, is a huge piece of information, because it's going to give you the confidence that your cymbal is giving you the sound you want, even though behind the kit, it's not exactly what you think you want. They're 2 different things.
They are. Yeah. My buddy Jonathan Green, incredible player. He taught me when I first went to go see him. There's a place here called the Whiskey Box that they play at every Wednesday in Winston-Salem. When I first went to see him, I went and saw him and heard him, and I was like, man, he's got great sounding cymbals. Kit sounds great. And then I would go sit in and play, and it was like he had the most bone dry cymbals I had ever heard in my life. They were Big Brand S, Big and Uglies were the model. I don't know if you've played it. I hate those cymbals. I personally can't stand them. But it was like they were perfect for that room. It was like they were bone dry, no life, but in that venue, which is a lot of brick everywhere, it's like they were perfect.
Yeah.
And then he kind of taught me this idea of more control, more control than you think you need. Because something that's going to open up at the slightest touch is going to get out of hand, and you're going to be sitting there fighting it. And then he since has kind of gravitated. He's a Mehmet artist now, but Istanbul Mehmet. But he's gravitated towards like slightly less dry, a little bit more open, a little bit more stuff going on. But he still has heavier cymbals. He plays very low volume acoustic music exclusively, pretty much. I'm sure he does some wedding gigs and stuff, but his cymbals are heavy. He's got these heavy things that have a little bit of wash, but it's mostly stick. And it's like, it's kind of the player that he is too. He's very much like, he's an artist and a high level technician at, he can play crazy stuff like Mason. And it's like, he just wants everything to translate. He wants to hear what he's actually playing. He doesn't want that cymbal to get in the way. And so thinking about these little things and, gauging yourself as a player, what kind of music you play, what kind of sticks you use, how hard you hit, and then just add a touch more of little factors that then maybe you would originally think. Add a touch more brightness, add a touch more control and dryness, a touch more complexity, a touch more weight. A lot of people get in touch with me for commissions and they ask, well, I want this cymbal and I want it to be 2,000 grams and it's a 22 inch. And I'm like, but you're describing what characteristics you want. And you're not going to get that from something.
You're not going to get it there. Yeah.
You won't get it. You might get it at like at triple pianissimo. You might have that characteristic that you're wanting.
We do have parameters to what we can do that are, they're determined by physics. There's, we can manipulate certain things to a certain extent, but it's usually going to be a compromise to another element. Right. You're not going to have it all in one cymbal. And you're definitely not going to get that sound out of, a paper thin when we're, that they need a medium.
Right. Yeah. So it's like you could kind of just say, well, trust me, let's make that cymbal 2,300 grams. And then we can talk, and then even 2,300 grams is really thin, but sometimes you do that and the customer's still unhappy and they're like, I want it thin, and you go, okay. And then,
you give them what they want. Ultimately.
Right.
And it's sort of, it is your job as a cymbalsmith to hold the hand, educate if need be, let them know what what happens to when you do this and do that. You don't have to, of course, don't have to explain the whole craft, but specific to where the disconnect might be happening. That's your moment of learning that you get to that's that intersection where you get to explain what's going on.
Yes.
And help somebody get through the process and
right.
Deal with it.
It's very true.
It's a thing. Yeah, Koei has a line called the Absolute Series, and they, to me, are not a cymbal that I would ever choose. You know, like, it doesn't resonate with me. But one of the fellows that's working with us now is using that line, and he turned me on to a whole thing about it. This even applies to what I've said about cymbals versus the sound versus what happens out there. That particular line of cymbals is a B21 with iron added to it. And the iron subdues it sort of like notches it gives a drop at the upper end of the frequency spectrum and gives it a fast decay without giving up much volume. Stage sound guys love them. Recording guys love them. You just throw a mic in the air and it's sort of like they're pre-EQ'd. It's almost like sort of like a taped cymbal without giving up a loss. Just a dampened higher frequency. Behind the kit, it doesn't do anything for me. But in that environment, they're awesome. And the people that are using them in that way are loving them.
Interesting.
That's kind of Koei's thing, is he's modifying his alloys to suit his construction methods. And also to bring out other frequencies, but that adding that iron to them definitely it's a thing. It works.
Yeah, interesting.
It's really cool.
That's really fascinating.
But that's another case of a cymbal sound on stage versus its environment, how it's being used. It's a tool.
It's a tool, right? Yeah. Exactly.
So anyway,
man, we've gone. This has been the longest, by far longest podcast I've done.
Oh my God, what are we at right now?
I think we're at like 2 hours 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Oh, your poor listeners. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I bet you people are going to love it. I've really enjoyed this. I think this is chock full of like good stuff. I don't think with the podcast, I tend to think that I'm definitely an external processor. My wife will tell you, like, I am the most external processor that has ever lived. And so oftentimes with the podcast, I'm not necessarily even saying things that I'm like fully grasp what they mean. I'm more so just kind of working it all out in the midst of talking with
contemporaneously. Yeah.
And I walk away from every conversation like this with a fresh set of eyes towards a particular topic. The cymbal pricing thing is huge. I think that's something I'm going to be mulling over big time.
Yeah, I think we all need to I can't wait to hear the other people's reply or responses to that, and it could turn out that I'm completely wrong, but that's
I don't think
how
you
I'm
are
feeling about it right. No, I don't think I am either. My gut tells me that I'm not.
Yeah.
I've actually pushed the pencil some, and then talking with other people, and he's like, generally speaking, I think I'm kind of right about that.
Right. Yep. And I think it's gonna.
This industry is so young that we really question that yet.
Right. And if that becomes your like one of your main contributions to it, I mean, I feel like it would be valuable, because we are in a place where guys like us are actually, we're very small. There's only a handful of us in the States. There's 50 or so in the whole world, or whatever it is right now, and it's a very small group of people, but we have hugely impacted the industry.
Absolutely, yeah.
Hugely.
It's funny. It is funny to see. I mean, I can smell it, in the air. The changes that this little community has had on the corporate one.
Right.
It's cool.
And it's and things like Paul Francis doing his thing is only just, I see that being something that really just ramps things up. I've been talking with him actually about getting him on the podcast. I'm going to ask him the question that you posed about pricing and what he thinks about it. Cause I mean,
that would be so good to hear his reply, because it would be, Paul is a respected guy, both on the consumer side and on the production side. Yeah. And he brings a lot of experience to the table. And if he agrees with some of what I've said, it's going to be a boon to everybody, even the consumer. It's going to be, in other words, it's going to give the consumer a degree of confidence, because Paul Francis said it.
Yeah.
It's not, me and my little podunk thing going on here. This is somebody that everybody's aware of and respects. And
Right.
this is going to be interesting. I can't wait to hear what happens.
I'm going to just sit there the whole time and like, I probably won't. I don't know if I'll say anything. I'll say a little, I'll obviously ask questions and try and guide it a little bit, but I feel like that's one of those ones where I'm going to take a real back seat just because I've already talked to him on the phone and man, it's like this, it was like 20 minutes on the phone with him and the stuff coming out of him, like the experiences.
So much to a podcast.
Oh my gosh.
You might end up having to break it up in 2 or 3 parts. You know,
right.
I hope that, yeah, please do. I want to hear what he's got to say. I'm loving your format, man. I can't express enough my joy that you've started doing this Cymbal podcast. And
thanks, man. And
giving it a long form and letting us all talk. And even if a lot of people fade off because we nerd out too far down the line, it's okay.
Yeah.
There's going to be, they can come back to it again, or, you know,
hardcore
people will ride it to the end. You know?
Right. I look at my analytics and each episode has like maybe 75 listens or whatever, which is like, you know, analytics wise, that's not great. Like, you know, you want to get thousands and, you know, hundreds of thousands. I don't want that actually. Like I'm actually looking for the people. I'm trying to give the people like myself. Like I scoured the internet, scoured podcasts just to find any little tiny clip of, you know, a tiny clip of Roberto talking, you know, and then like try to find a translation to what was he saying. And he might've been talking about how to clean a toilet. I don't, you know, it's like, but it's him. So it's like, okay, he might drop a little nugget. And so that's what you had to do. I feel like it's maybe akin to back in the day when you went to a record store and you had to get a record and you wore out the grooves because you listened to it over and over again. It's like, it's kind of a modern day version of that because there has been zero information, even as little as 4 years ago when I was first diving in. I mean, there was nothing online, you know, and I at the very least, I want to provide a place so it's like a catalog of like, you can listen to Nicky Moon, you can listen to Burke, you can listen to Mangiello, Paul, you know, I would love to get Lauritsen on here and just, I mean,
go get as many list. Yeah.
Go down the list and hopefully it can at least inspire people. And maybe there's a market for this with musicians. Cause I think everything we talk about cymbals, I feel like applies to music and applies to art. So you can take what we're saying and easily apply it. If you're just a drummer, you don't have to be
I think it'll do well. I mean, regardless of how you feel about Joe Rogan, and I even have mixed feelings about Joe Rogan, but I love the fact that there was a 3-hour interview with somebody that either one, I was interested in hearing what they had to say, or two, somebody I didn't know who the hell it was. And it was an interesting topic. And I just opened my mind up and it could go in deep. I remember back when it was into politics, you know, having Bernie Sanders on as an example.
Yeah.
He was always made, whenever you saw him on the news, was a screaming lunatic, you know?
Right.
Give him a section where he could breathe, relax, say what he wanted to say. It's like, okay, whether I agree or not, it's not the point, is that he sounded like a rational human being with some thoughts, and it made sense as to what he was saying was lining up to the logic that I was hearing, and it wasn't about a sound bite.
Right. You could agree.
Great for that.
You could agree with him or vehemently disagree with him.
It's still interesting nonetheless.
It's still interesting, and you're able to catch him in a context where he's more who he is, you know, and it's not just the soundbite little clip that they throw up on Fox or CNN or whatever. Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing that's tearing us apart as a country right now.
Yep.
Please God, I don't want to talk politics, but just overarching, very simply put, it's like we're so divided because we're not talking to each other. You know, we're not trying to see the humanity in the other side. We're just demonizing.
And we're also not listening.
We're not listening at all. It applies to both. It's not one or the other. It's both.
In the old day, you had to watch, you had to listen to what was up, because you only had but so many options, and it was one way. It was coming at you, so you were listening. Now the tables are turned, where everybody has a platform that you can just put stuff out, and you can choose whether to comment or not reply to a comment, or the content's being fed to you niche specific. You're not being challenged at
Right.
all.
You're in an echo chamber. You're in your own bubble, only hearing your perspective shot back at you. And I mean, that's the enemy of art, because like art is challenging a lot of times, and different ideas can be challenging, and challenge is where you grow. Like when you have to sit down and play your single stroke roll and you sound like garbage, you're challenged to practice it and do it more. But if you never try it and you just sit back and like, well, that guy's single stroke is terrible. It's like, well, can you do it? It's like, where are you at in this whole discussion? And I want to be the kind of person that's constantly, I want to be kind of amorphous creatively. I want to be able to constantly shifting and adjusting based on what's coming at me and what's inspiring me in the moment, what makes me happy, what makes me sad. Like I want all that to be infused into the work. And I hope that's the way to actually make something that's as good as I can make. I don't give a crap about making something better than anybody else or being the best or, making all the money. I don't give a crap about it. I just want to make the best thing I can make. And that's going to require total devotion to the craft.
Mm-hmm.
Great. But I'll do that and I'll sacrifice that because I know it's good for me as a person. I want to be challenged. I want to be changed. You know what I mean?
Your longevity actually depends on it. Because, if you're not getting some sort of reward on whatever level, it actually has to be on all levels, to be honest. Creatively, financially, physically, all these things. If it's not hitting the mark, you're gonna put it down or be disgusted or discouraged, or so you have to create that environment for yourself. It's so easy to run down if you don't lift your head up every once in a while and take a look and assess things and where you need to change. You're going to end up, in a corner and stuck, and it's maybe going to be harder to correct.
Right.
So it has to be, I guess, contiguous. It has to be unified. And you have to balance that. That's difficult in anything. It's part of the challenge. It's part of that $75 shop hour rate, an hour rate. It's important. It's got to be there.
Yeah.
Sweeping the floor or hammering a cymbal.
Whatever it is.
I had all rolled up into that damn figure.
I had a business coach tell me recently, which I'm still trying to think about this, but I had a business coach tell me anything you do, you need to value at $100 to $500 an hour. And if if you can pay someone less than $100 an hour to do that job, you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, because I've cleaned my own toilets. I have shipped all of my stuff. I have sat there and fine sanded the bearing edges on my drums. I've done, everything that I could, get all the way down to whatever wage, I've done it myself.
Bookkeeping is mine right now.
Yeah.
I hate it. I hate it. And I am now facing out to the point that I'm going to have to pay somebody more than I want to pay to do it, because for one, I'm not good at it.
Mm-hmm. Me neither.
Two, it just, it makes sense because it gets that monkey off of my back.
Right. Yeah.
That
gives you the margin to do.
How much time am I wasting doing something like that and doing a poor job at it?
Yeah. Right.
It's definitely true. I should get better at all these little ancillary responsibilities, but at the same time, there is a time to just kind of cut your losses, roll that expense into things. It's valuable.
And look for other ways to make it up. If it feels like something you can't afford, look for other ways. I'm bringing on a guy that's starting next week. He's starting on Monday. And it's just a part of me bringing him in and I'm giving him a lot of hours. It's like I'm giving him more hours than maybe I could afford, but it's like, that's going to afford me the energy and the margin to put it into figuring out how to grow the business so that I can afford it. And then it's like, you got to make these leaps into the unknown territory every now and then. And
your employee's going to have to put the time in too. I mean, no matter how you train them, they've got to put in the hours to where it becomes second nature and comfortable and profitable ultimately.
Right. Yeah. And so that's, it's the dangerous thing about owning a business is you got to make that, you have to step out over the chasm before the bridge is fully built. You got to,
and you'll hit this crossroads where it's sort of like, okay, under this current model, I could be or need to be producing more. Well, in order to produce more, we have to get a bigger shop space. I'm going to have to get another 2 lathes so that I don't have to have one special to this, one special, and these sort of things. Or you reduce the demand and increase the price to be commensurate with how you want to produce your product. And both of those are viable methods, but you got to figure out which path you want to go. You can't just run with, well, more people want more cymbals, and then, you know, work an extra 20 hours a week.
Right. And then your relationships suffer, your happiness suffers, and then the work suffers too. Cause it's like, that's the problem with scaling, is you cannot scale. Like for me to get someone to make cymbals that I would be proud to put Timothy Roberts, the stamp on, I mean, you'd have to invest.
It's almost impossible.
I think it is impossible.
I think the only way you're going to get a Timothy Roberts cymbal is Timothy Robert makes it. Unless you make a machine that specifically has parameters out in, so you get that uniformity that gives you, if you can quantify the TR sound, if it can, and that's for R&D. How long would that take? Right. You know, I mean, as a one-man outfit to support that, that's a whole nother endeavor. You're years off from hitting that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And why? You got to factor in why. Do I really want that? You know? Yeah,
that's the thing that I know, man. We could probably do a 5-hour podcast. I know that is something that I have. I had a buddy of mine tell me when I was starting. He's like, decide what your ultimate goal is. Decide what the cap is for what you want your business to be, and work towards that. It doesn't, like, don't just be the arbitrary, like as many sales as possible. Because what that means is you're going to have to start producing overseas, producing a factory that's going to crank out. That means your quality goes way down. That means, you know, all these kinds of things. That means you're going to work 90 hours a week. It's like, and then all the issues that come along with that. Like if I work 80 hours a week, 70 hours a week, even if I do that, I'm going to be burned out in 3 years, 4 years. I will have a terrible marriage. I won't be a good friend. I won't be a good son. Hopefully one day I won't be I want to be a good father, but I wouldn't be a good father, and that's the problem with all of this. And so it's like a holistic approach to everything is what we got to do. And for young guys in the industry, it's just like starting out in music. Decide what you want your cap to be. How many cymbals do you want to sell a year? Best case scenario. Okay, then do everything you do now, let it be in service to that. And with that in mind.
And it's going to take you time to even figure that number out.
Right.
I mean, you're actually going to be established already before you're even really going to have to entertain that question of how many cymbals can I make a year?
Right.
Because I mean, unless they're piling up and you're making them and they're just piling up in the corner,
right.
That's, you're buying a lot of blanks. You're
That's
not running a business. You're just making cymbals.
It's a hobby.
Yeah. It's wow, man. We just have to.
We'll do a part 2. Let's do a part.
Yeah.
Let's do a part 2. What I've realized is that last thing I'll say about the podcast thing, I feel like I'm going to go back and probably ask everybody I've done a podcast with to do another one once, because I want to get like the quality of everything up a little bit. It's like the Zoom thing is cool, but I mean, the quality of audio coming through my, MacBook Pro is going to be sufficient, but you hear, our favorite podcast that we hear, it's like the audio is pristine. But whenever that happens, I'll be like, I'll probably cycle through everyone I've already interviewed, because it's they're the most fascinating conversations to me, and I always get something out of it. So Burke, thank you so much, seriously, for your time.
You're so welcome.
It really is a pleasure. Yeah, really. I really love your work and all that. So.
Well, thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Well, keep doing what you're doing. I look forward to checking out Philippe's interview. I've been waiting for that one to come up.
Yeah. Yep. That'll be fun. I'm uploading it today. So awesome. Whatever day it is, it's July 15th. So it'll be live. And yeah, so last thing, tell people where they can find you and buy stuff from you. Okay.
Bronzepie.com for the website. And then at Bronze Pie Cymbals for Instagram, and at BW Cymbals on Instagram. I do have a Bronze Pie on Facebook. I don't even mess with that anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Not worth it.
you know, and I would just say that if anybody finds something on the website or can't find what they're looking for on the website, get in touch, because I have stuff that's not even posted that should be posted, you know, listed online. And that just is due to, you know, life in general. I tried to get around, but something suffers at some point. But I will do everything I can to help you out, find something. Just because it's not on the site doesn't mean I don't have it.
Yeah.
Even though it should be listed.
Yeah, that's the problem. I have that problem too. So, but yeah, hey guys, thank you so much for listening. This has been the Reverie podcast. We'll check you next time.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tim.